today, but you'll see there's a little green person over there and there. So if there is a fire alarm, we need to evacuate as quickly as possible. We've got a lot to get through today. I have sort of identified some timings for the items, and I'm proposing for the integrated rail plan discussion that we put an hour in for that, but I'll come back to that in a minute. First of all, have we got any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor Williams and Councillor Brooks, Councillor Owen and Councillor Tucker, and Councillor Waltham and Councillor Hannigan. Thank you.
So a couple of items just before we start. Unison circulated a letter yesterday, which you all will have read. Two items really as part of it. One, expressing their concern at the content of the integrated rail plan, but also the way in which news about how TfN might look after the integrated rail plan coming out on social media, because obviously it impacts on people's jobs and things. So they wanted me to note it and say that, you know, it has been circulated, and maybe that's something that can be discussed as we go into the discussion on that. I've also got a request from Councillor Brown, and this actually relates to item 9, to note at the beginning that there are a number of areas in the north who put forward bids for the GBR head office. And there's Cheshire West and Chester are supporting Cheshire East bid, North Yorkshire are supporting City of York, Darlington are supporting a bid from Tees Valley. And that, I think the note is, and it's in item 9, that GBR needs to be in the north. So good luck, whoever's bidding for that. Okay, so item 2, declarations of interest. Anybody got anything they want to declare? No? Okay. Minutes of previous meeting, 29th of September. Could I have a proposer that they're a correct record, and assuming items will be picked up during the meeting? Councillor Brown, did you just... Okay. Seconder? Okay. Thank you, Charlie. Okay, so item 4 is the integrated rail plan. The report that you've got before you in your board papers was released before we understood what the IRP was going to be in full. We'd just seen what had been released to the press. So what I propose to do is I'm going to ask Martin to give us an overview and an update of where we are. There will circulated some slides for you to have a look at, and then I'm going to open it up for discussion. Okay, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. So a way we suggest handling this item is that my colleagues Tim Foster and Tim Wood will provide the board with a short readout on the key issues that we think you should be aware of when you're looking at and debating this item. I suggest, Chair, then I think there's a motion that would be moved, which you can then use to shape the discussion. And, Chair, after that, I can maybe just pick up on the point that follows on from the Unison letter and just reassure members as to how we're keeping the staff informed and excited on what's happening moving forward. So if I might introduce Tim Foster.
Thank you. Morning members. We've been studying the Integrated Rail Plan since the days it was published. Myself and Tim Wood will give you a very brief overview. I will cover the implications for connectivity and the economy. Tim will follow with an assessment of the implications for Northern Power's rail and the preferred network. I should start by saying we would normally at this point be giving you quite a technical assessment. That isn't possible in this case because the technical evidence behind the integrated rail plan hasn't been published, and therefore what we're giving you today is our understanding and our reading of the document itself, because, as I said, we don't have a technical documentation that we would normally expect, and nor has TfN or its officers been involved in the development of the plan either. And I don't think I need to repeat the high-level conclusions of the IRP either. I think as members are well aware, in removing key elements of the eastern leg of HS2, in only committing to a partial, limited investment in Northern Power's rail, the integrated rail plan represents really not only a significant disappointment in terms of the level of investment, but but raises uncertainty of the remainder of the MPR network as TfN has developed it. And Tim will say a little bit more about that in a bit. So solutions between key economic areas are left open. Options appear to have seemingly been closed off. And I think whilst the board might have expected or anticipated a less than ambitious integrated rail plan, I don't think we quite anticipated such an incomplete and uncertain one either. And again, that gives us challenges in assessing the full impacts. I think it raises real questions about the level of integration and whether the proposals really will act together as a coherent network. And again, we need to understand more before we can advise the board on that. But it does appear that there are concerns about reliability, about capacity, and we simply do not know at this point if this is a network that will work for passengers and freight. I'll say a brief word on funding too. I mean, you will have noted the conclusions of the Northern Powers Partnership, with which we are in broad agreement. At 54 billion, the level of funding is below that required to deliver MPR and HS2 in full. That much is obvious. But it's also below the level of funding that both TfN and the National Infrastructure Commission said was required. The IRP itself appears to leave open the door to future funding, but there is no detail on either what government's view of the total end state of funding ought to be, nor is there any detail about how government might move beyond this initial, what is described as an initial round of investment. I think needless to say, this has really fundamental consequences for both for rail connectivity and the wider objectives of TfN Street Transport Plan, including many of our key connectivity corridors, the ones really required to create that interconnected north. And that's true for both the southern and central Pennines corridors, as well as the connectivity to the northeast and potentially to the northwest as well. We aren't at this point able to say that much about the carbon impacts, and the decarbonisation strategy is on the agenda later. It does appear that because we're only seeing a partial actual electrification programme being brought forward at this point, that we can expect it to be at least until the 2040s until we can run fully electrified services. And again, in the weeks to come, we'll be looking at the implications of all of this for decarbonising the North Transport network. I'll turn briefly to the second slide, which is covering the economic consequences of this, which again feel quite fundamental and quite profound. It is quite clear that the level of investment and the connectivity that comes from that investment is not consistent with the level of economic transformation that the SDP seeks and was set out in the Northern Powers Independent Economic Review, which calls into question whether the 100 billion GVA, 850,000 jobs and indeed 2 million homes can be delivered between now and 2050. I think that bit must be fairly clear. But I did want to touch briefly on the wider economic implications of what's been proposed here, because there is now an additional risk that because the IRP focuses on connecting higher productivity areas in the north, and in the IRP that's put forward as the rationale for focusing on York to Liverpool, because it focuses on that one, because of the lack of commitment and the uncertainty on key connectivity corridors, and particularly in Yorkshire and the North East, there must now be a significant risk of economic imbalance. And there is a chart in the slides that I won't dwell on. It's not our assessment, it's the National Infrastructure Commission's assessment from the Rail Needs Assessment a year ago, against one of their scenarios, probably the closest scenario to what's in the Integrated Rail Plan. And that just demonstrates that the productivity uplift between east and west is really quite fundamental. So we risk not only a widening, our inability to close the north-south divide, but also a widening inequality between east and west. I could say quite a bit more, I think, particularly in terms of the absence of regeneration impacts, the lack of recognition that that ongoing uncertainty will have in terms of strategic economic plans right across the north. But I'll pause there and I'll hand over to my colleague Tim, who will pick up the NPR implications.
Thank you, Tim, and good morning, Board. So we're on slide 4. I'm not going to dwell on this slide for long, but what you can see here is the shape and extent of Transport for the North's preferred NPR network. It spans from Liverpool to Hull, connecting to HS2 and the East Coast Main Line down to London, and connecting Sheffield and Newcastle to other cities across the north. There is 99 kilometres of new line connecting Liverpool, Manchester Airport, Manchester, Bradford and Leeds, and significant upgrades across the remaining network. This network provides much needed capacity and improves reliability and resilience of the existing network. It's not just journey times, but the predictability of those journey times, which will underpin the benefits Tim's just spoken about. Critically, this network has been tested to ensure it works. Go to slide 5. This slide compares with the network given in the IRP with our preferred network. There's a small section in common between Warrington and the HS2 line into Manchester Airport, shown in orange. Purple is no longer part of the high-speed network. NPR will form part of the upgrades now to the East Coast Main Line. And in green, the proposals are for some already planned additions to the TRU scheme. These additions are necessary and actually very welcome. But fundamentally, TRU and the new line we preferred do different things. They serve different markets, and having both provided much needed resilience on this corridor, as well as the opportunity to transform the economic potential of Bradford. The dark blue shows options which represent a downgrading of the ambition, and the very pale lines are not included now in the IRP proposals, other than commitments to consider further. Finally, none of the new stations included in our NPR network, even those costed in the low option network. So none of them are in the IRP. The IRP is vague about the performance of the core network, with some information on journey times, but only partial information about train frequency. The infrastructure must be able to meet the needs of the mixed traffic running on it. To do this, you need to stitch together the network. It will now need to be redone as a matter of urgency without the eastern leg to prove the proposals work. We already know that the upgrade between Warrington and Liverpool doesn't improve journey times beyond what's best possible today, sort of pre-pandemic as well. It only increases the frequency of the trains by up to 6 an hour in each direction. The upgrade proposals in the IRP and the additional services into Liverpool on the West Coast Main Line and the existing Liverpool Lime Street station might overstretch the already constrained capacity. And we already know trains arriving in Lime Street currently, 60% of them are late. Trains leaving Lime Street, 32% of them are late. On the Leeds to Manchester, it's yet to be determined what level of service along the Trans-Pennine rail corridor or at Leeds station can actually support the reliability. So the question there would be, if it's an NPR end state, can we have 6 fast trains in each direction, Manchester to Leeds, 2 semi-fasts, and then of course we've got at least one of the hourly freight services to run through there. The IRP does not provide a fully electrified solution beyond the core network, therefore it may not be possible to operate fully electric trains across the north. For example, all services to Hull will have to be bi-mode trains or continued with diesels. So that's precluding them from the new line between Marsden and Warrington, and of course the HS2 network. Instead, these services will have to use existing routes or be upgraded routes via Manchester Piccadilly or Victoria, which could limit the wider connectivity piece. There isn't enough technical detail accompanying the IRP to properly evaluate whether the network in the IRP actually works, whether the indicative train timetables can work, or what the impacts will be on travel across the north over the next 25 years. By choosing extensive upgrades, there of course will also be a rolling stock disruption to the travelling public that will span over a number of decades. In summary, the MPR corridors have received, at best, what we consider to be the minimum viable, and we were reporting concerns about the resilience and reliability of those. And there are also many questions to be answered and to test the viability of the proposals, as well as the economic and social impacts that Tim spoke of. We'll just move to the last slide 6, please. So now turning to the timings, what we see here is the difference in the timings of construction for TfN's preferred network and then the IRP. We've been told that the benefits can be delivered up to 10 years sooner with the IRP than our previous plans as TfN. Our evaluation shows that the green boxes, the IRP, for most of the corridors are later than the phasing scenario shown in the navy. While elements of electrification between Manchester and Staley Bridge, Huddersfield to Leeds and Leeds to York appear to the left and earlier, there are aspects of the TRU scheme which are now being badged as NPR Phase 1, were intended to be delivered in the same timescales regardless of the NPR option selected. More critically, the IRP timescales indicate the railway won't be fully open to passengers until the mid-2040s, which is later than the times we propose as TfN. Bradford to Leeds electrification is also shown as earlier, as the IRP proposes an upgrade and electrification of the existing line, keeping the existing Bradford interchange station, whereas our proposals were for a new line integrated through Bradford with a new station. The core NPR network, as it's called, in the IRP between Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds and York will not be open to passengers until 5 years or more later than our proposals, not until the mid to late 2040s. So on NPR, the IRP is proposing less for the north and later. I'll hand back to the Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim, for that overview. And I'm sure I share everyone's disappointment in what was sent to us last week. So I'm going to give people the opportunity now to have their say and put forward their points of view. There is a motion which I'll propose we look at in the minute, but first I'm going to ask Tracey Braden, Mayor of West Yorkshire, just to give us a quick overview.
Thank you so much, Louise. And those who have compared the TfN proposal and the IRP will be as shocked as I am at the lack of listening from this government. It's not integrated, and I certainly don't think it is a plan. It's a betrayal of levelling up for West Yorkshire. It doesn't feel fair, and it doesn't feel transparent or clear. It's building on Victorian infrastructure, a plan that is not going to be fit for purpose in the 21st century. We know, as a region, how important Northern Powerhouse Rail is for us. This is not about just connecting cities. It's absolutely about connecting communities. And I just would like to reiterate how angry the people of West Yorkshire were when this was announced, and how betrayed the people of Bradford feel in particular. We as a group approved Northern Powerhouse Rail with that stop in Bradford. That was our preferred choice. That has been utterly disregarded by this plan. I absolutely think government need to think again. We are happy to work with them to think again. We have proposed a free vote in Parliament, and I would encourage all of the 54 MPs across West Yorkshire to stand together to make the case that this is just not good enough. Just a couple of questions. How are we going to connect Leeds and Sheffield? For those that looked at the mass transit numbers, 200 million was allocated for mass transit. 100 million of that was allocated for a feasibility study looking at how you get fast trains from Sheffield to Leeds, potentially coming round to the same conclusion that we need HS2. I'm not sure who holds the pen on that, who has the money for that, and there is very little transparency. Is that from the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement? We have some money for mass transit. There's definitely no clarity. How do we, with this plan, Create that step change for connectivity for the most disadvantaged community in West Yorkshire, in Bradford, the youngest city, the most diverse city, the city with the greatest opportunity to level up. How are they going to get connections to Leeds, Sheffield, Manchester, Liverpool and beyond? Also, the mitigations for TransPennine, where are those in this proposal? We can't have another timetable disaster. We have ambitions for West Yorkshire, and this absolutely doesn't go anywhere near enough. This could be seen, finally, as just a bad week for Boris Johnson. It's the Social Care Act, it's a bad week around transport. This is not a bad week for the people of West Yorkshire. This is a bad decade, a bad 2 decades, because it's just not value for money when we're patching up something that in 10 years' time we're going to have to look again and spend more money. I am saying to government, this is not acceptable. We will not roll over and accept this, particularly when we've done all the work as a board to offer to government a solution. So I'm hoping that I have colleagues in the room that agree, and we have proposals in mind of what to do for next steps. But I just wanted to make it clear that West Yorkshire, for West Yorkshire, this is just not good enough.
Thank you very much, Tracey. A very passionate speech there, and it's probably what we're all feeling inside. I have got a list of people. So what I suggest we do is we have the discussion and then bring the motion in at the end. That's probably best. So next I've got Steve Rotherham.
Chair, do you mind if I just come in? So, yeah, I'll happily take, I won't come in and I'll capture what people say when I then put forward the motion. Sorry to, yeah, okay. Sorry.
I think over the last 7 days or so, if you believed the spin from national government, then this does everything that we asked for. And I think we're going to hear a number of contributions that will pull that fallacy to pieces, because we've spent 6 years and we've all dedicated a lot of our time and effort into putting forward something that was realistic, it was deliverable, and we believed within the envelope that we were told to construct that business case, it was affordable. Even though the sums are mouth-watering, but enough infrastructure that the sums are always huge. And somehow we're now supposed to be grateful for a suboptimal option, which is crumbs off the table, in all honesty, in the greater scheme of things. So I think everybody will put their point of view forward, and I just wanted to explain our position in the Liverpool City region. The City region, along this process, has made a number of significant concessions, and we've always worked towards trying to get an option that was acceptable to government, but also acceptable to the 1.6 million people in the Liverpool City region. What we've been hit with is what I described as a cheap and nasty option months and months ago, and I said that this was the likely outcome. It's not even 5.1, the option that we were that was put on the table as something for us to consider. It's a watered down version of 5.1, and for the government to say we can, for instance, have a station, it's very good of them, but what they've said is we have to pay for it ourselves. Well, in that case, I want a space port in Liverpool, and I want a number of, a monorail and everything, but that if we're paying for it ourselves, it's a ridiculous argument for the government to put forward. They don't say this in other parts of the country, in all honesty, and they didn't say it at all during the Crossrail development in London. Although, of course, we will look towards the motion later on and the potential for us to look towards contributions to the development. Whitehall made it difficult for us, the department made it difficult for us at times to put forward our case, but what Whitehall has done now is to take NPR back in-house. It's no longer a decision for NPR, and there are some questions that I'd like to ask Chair
of the Chief Executive and Tim about the position of TFN now, and we're no longer a co-client but a co-sponsor. What does that actually mean to the status of this organisation? Have we been downgraded? Because it seems likely to me that we have. Another ridiculous argument for national government is that they are sticking to reduced journey times between Liverpool and Manchester. How they've done this is by not stopping at 2 stations. And so if we just had an express service between Liverpool and Manchester, I've got a suggestion we could even speed things up more by doing that and cutting out all the intermediate stations. That doesn't help the local economy. It actually causes a huge detriment. We're not expecting anything to happen in our area. We were told 2038 it would be about the timescale for our area. The IRP is 2040 odd at best. Plus the fact is, because it's not a new twin-track line between Liverpool and Warrington to Manchester, it would cause between 5 and 7 years of economic detriment to the Liverpool City region economy, which could cost hundreds of millions or more because we're so reliant on the visitor economy in our area. So actually, we've got businesses now saying that this is not an option that they could even have us consider because it will mean such an impact for those people. It's simply not true for the government to claim also that they are trebling the amount of trains between Liverpool and Manchester. At the end of next year, we will be back to pre-pandemic levels. So at best, we'll get 2 trains more per hour between Liverpool and Manchester, which is not the trebling of the journeys between those 2 great cities. And the major thing that we said all along, every single person here from Liverpool to Hull to Liverpool has said one of the most significant aspects of this has to be about freight capacity. We're going to talk about decarbonisation later, and yet this is at odds with everything that we will talk about later because it doesn't do what it says on the tin. It doesn't provide the additional freight capacity for ports like Liverpool, which will become more strategically important to UK PLC, especially if we do have bilateral trade deals with America. Where are those goods going to come into, and how do we get those goods over the last few miles to their final destination? It is incoherent at best. It is a huge disappointment, I think, to every single one of us. And it's something that genuinely we are now seriously considering, that we might be better off not having this option at all, rather than the disruption that this would cause. That's not transformational. That's not tackling climate emergency. That's not helping the business economy grow in the Liverpool City region. It's a shambles. It's chaotic. And if the government and any minister, Secretary of State or the Prime Minister want to debate it with me, I'd be more than happy to go live on television to do that.
Thank you very much, Mayor Rotherham. There were 2 questions there, which I was also going to ask. What is a co-sponsor and what is a co-client? I think it's important that the public understand what that means. So, Martin, could you explain that, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think at this stage it's hard to be able to be definitive on that because we have just started conversations with the department as to what that actually means. What I have received in writing is confirmation from the Director General of Rail that the letter that I received last week does not in any way change the status, role or responsibilities of Transport for the North as a subnational transport body. But the issue about what happens with the NPR programme and the team, that is a conversation that is ongoing and live at the moment.
Thank you. So now I've got Darren Hale. Thanks.
Thank you, Louise. I think if you look at slide 2, Hull has actually been removed from the rail map of the UK, effectively. That's, not overstating it. I mean, we see this as almost a beaching moment, based on what Tim said earlier on about the fact that, you know, effectively, if you're not electrified, you won't get any of the new rail stock. The people of Hull and East Yorkshire are going to be condemned to having the worst rail stock, everybody else's leftovers. So it's bad for the north, it's catastrophic for the city of Hull and the people of East Yorkshire in terms of the withering on the vine of our rail services. So, you know, to remove us from the Trans-Pennine main route, effectively main line, other than Sheffield, I think, you know, no one's been treated badly on this plan. That's what I'll personally say. I think the point that Steve made, absolutely cock on the point about freight. As I've said so many times in this board, you can't have half a freight route east to west. You either have one or you don't have one. And under this plan, there isn't one. There is certainly not an option for an electrified one going forward, and that's catastrophic. I'm particularly worried about what Tim said earlier about the, you know, effectively the potential for levelling up, even on the north, that we're going to have a disproportionate levelling up between the cities and areas. So they are condemned to the slow train to Leeds constantly. And it isn't just about the dear people of Hull and East Yorkshire and actually parts of North Yorkshire, that some of those stations are in North Yorkshire. A lot of those commuter towns, where some of them come in east from places like Brough, Selby, to Hull, a lot of them go west to Leeds. So they're Leeds commuter towns. They should be as important to the west riding as they are to the east riding, because that's the loss of economic activity for our region by that failure to upgrade. And what I would say, particularly, we run the risk of playing a game of competitive disadvantages in this room. It's who's suffered most and and I think we have to stick together. But what I would say is I represent probably, depending on how you look at things, probably the third or fourth poorest district in the country, poorest unitary authority. And this is not going to do anything towards levelling up. And even if anyone in the north slightly benefits from this plan, and I somehow doubt that anyone will, but if they were, we certainly don't. The East Riding certainly doesn't, and that's a real worry. I think for the CO2, it's really important. The Humber produces probably the highest amount of CO2 in Europe, other than perhaps the Ruhr Valley, in Germany. So effectively, that is the place where, if we're serious about climate change, the fight back about climate change has got to start in the Humber. But by failing to even look at the cheapest option, remember the cheapest IRP option, I've said it many times before, Tim said it here, was electrifying Hull to Sheffield, Hull to Selby. That was the cheapest part of this entire plan, and it's been struck out the plan. And without that electrification on those routes, I think the second longest stretch of railway in the country, so very easy to electrify, you're never going to get that connectivity to the ports if you don't get to Hull first and from Selby to Hull and Hull Sheffield first. So as I say, I can't tell you how angry I am. What I am also going to say, though, is I can't possibly support a motion going forward from this board that doesn't also mention Hull at some point. So I'm going to say to you that I give notice now, I want to amend that, because, again, otherwise we run the risk of, in some ways, being as bad as the government, don't we, as bad as the IRP, if we don't mention key areas of the north. But as I say, I think the north got completely done over with this, but I think some areas got it worse, and we were one of them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Darren. Chester's also been scrubbed off the map and North Wales as well, that no longer exists, so that's fine. Hans?
Thank you. It's difficult to know where to start with, because it seems like a complete mess that's been dropped on us.
It's something that some people might have expected right at the very start when it came from, it's going to start from the south and work its way to the north. But don't worry, it's coming your way. It's always a message we was getting. And I think there's some people had suspicions that all the funds and resources we spent in the south, and the more north it has to make do with what's left. Make do and mend, basically, what's left. And that's what we've been landed with, make do and mend, and in some cases, not even make do. And I think we do need to be bearing in mind with this. I think hindsight's a great thing, but we should have started in the north and worked our way to the south. I'm pretty certain now that we wouldn't be in the south wouldn't be in the same situation that we've been put in. And I think that's the forward thinking, 50-year plan, think out the box, deliver what you need to deliver to actually fix the rail problems in the whole of England, and particularly in the north of England. None of this meets that. None of it delivers what we was promised. None of it delivered what we was looking into, what we wanted to force. It doesn't deliver anything that we wanted. It delivers bits and pieces now and again. Like Steve Ovens said, take the crumbs off the table. That's all what's left now. We've had the meal in the south. You can have what's left on the table. And I think it's not good enough for a government that's going to say, we're going to give you, or actually work with you to deliver a transport system to be proud of and delivers possibility for growth for the whole of the north of England, and we've not got it. Like Steve Ovens says, a fast train going past areas and towns that actually need to actually be connected to them for their growth and their business opportunities. Standing on a platform, watching it whiz past you, even though it is at high speed, it's still passing you. And them towns and parts of the north don't get the opportunity for their businesses to grow, their town to grow. The prosperity that's needed in the north goes past them, again, at high speed. It was fantastic if you can't connect it. So I think the high speed is one thing, the time of the train is one thing. It's the timetable of trains, how many can get on the tracks. It's do you need new tracks to get to the growth that you needed? That's important there. Can you get on the trains? And the timetabling. We've already come across timetabling problems, and that this is just building up timetable problems for the future. How even if you can get on the train, if it does stop there, how frequent are you going to be? Can you get on? And then are they going to have to start to make do and mend with what you've got? I think it's a make do and mend option we've been given there. I think very, very disappointing that it is, particularly I think for Yorkshire, for Leeds and Yorkshire. I think better placing would have been Leeds and Manchester starting working their way through. But you can't let people down like this is doing. I think we need to support each other, and particularly Yorkshire. What they've got the worst part of this deal has been landed on their tables. And I think we need to have solidarity and actually work towards to make sure that gets changed. And I think the motion goes some way to doing that. We need to be supporting the motion with amendments if needed, but make sure we send a message back that the North is worth investing in. The North has got a future, and we have got people who deserve as much a right to live in as anyone else.
Thank you, Hans. And I think that point about it needs to be the whole system and us not competing against each other, I think is a really powerful one. And I was asked last week on some of the interviews, well, you're all right in Chester, you can get HS2. And I said, well, that misses the point. It's about the whole system, and this is about increasing capacity. And as Hans said, there will be places now that will miss out even more because the trains will just be whizzing past. Mark, I believe you want to speak on behalf of the LEPs.
That's right, thank you, Chair. I want to speak as a business representative, but also on behalf of some of the LEPs here today to support the feelings that have already been well expressed in this board, but also specifically to make 3 points. That the first is around our ambition. And I think when we all set out our ambitions for Northern Powerhouse Rail, we wanted to connect the whole of the North, people and businesses. Our ambition was much greater than connecting just Leeds and Manchester. And we set out strong plans to offer much needed connectivity to Bradford, but also right across the North as a whole, as Tim set out. Not doing so not only dampens the economic growth, but importantly, it's going to lead to widening economic imbalance and inequality, and we can't stand by. We have to help address this. The second point is around uncertainty. We've had so many delays to the publication of the IRP up to this point. That's already created much uncertainty. And we think that continues to dampen business confidence, which could have an impact in not investing in important investment decisions. We now need to provide much certainty to businesses as soon as possible. And as we've heard, there's still too many open options and there's too many open questions about how this is actually going to work in practice. And I think as a board, we need to apply the pressure to bring that certainty. And my last point is about the practical disruption. You know, I've been hearing hugely concerning sort of examples of the practical disruption that would be brought to our main Transpennine route for up to 10 years. Significant disruption. And of course, this could have been avoided if our plan was to create a new route, but it isn't. And the implications of this practical disruption for the people and businesses within the north is huge. And I think we need to stress that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Some really good points there. Craig Brown.
Thank you very much, Chair. Less for the north and later. Isn't it true that this is starting to sound and feel less like levelling up, but more like levelling off of the government's ambitions? Clearly, we want to welcome the commitment to the western leg of HS2 in Cheshire East, but we obviously share the disappointment of colleagues around the table. We're disappointed that we're facing further delays to that project. We're disappointed that the economic benefits that are associated with it will be delayed across the whole of the north. And so Cheshire East would like to seek from government a clear commitment to the Crewe North connection being delivered, the Crewe Hub station being delivered as part of Phase 2B and its inclusion in the 2B hybrid bill. And furthermore, we would like to see clarity around the delivery timescales for that project, rather than quoting the 4-year plus timescale that we're seeing in the current paper, so that those towns and cities that are seeking to benefit from HS2 can be developing complementary regeneration and growth plans to tie in with that realistic delivery timescale. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. I now have Tony Kirby.
Thank you, Chair. Much of this has been said by Darren as well. I'm Tony Kirby, representing the Hull and East Yorkshire LEP. So, I mean, from our perspective, we're sort of struggling to see the benefits for Hull and East Yorkshire business community within the ILP at all, really. There's no mention of East Yorkshire at all in the document. As a business community, it's disappointing that we've got no evidence base available, and I know that Tim has shared that previously. Just to summarise, really, our key concerns are we feel it cuts the area off from our core network, really, from the transport core network, and it undoubtedly harms our economic and productivity opportunities. It represents real lost opportunities for freight and the Freeport connections that we could have had. And finally, that quick win of the electrification of Hull to Sheffield Leeds would be relatively easy to do, and obviously doesn't do anything to decarbonise on the decarbonisation agenda. So, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I see Martin's writing lots of notes here, which is good, because there's so much we need to capture from everything that's been said today. Right, so the next person I've got is Mayor Driscoll.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things I really like about the Transport for the North Board is that we work together in a collegiate way, cross-party, businesses and politicians, everybody. And as someone who leads a cross-party combined authority, I don't engage in party political point scoring, so I'll keep this factual. On Monday, I was at the Port of Tyne when the Prime Minister was making his speech, doing an impression of a motor car. And the CBI are very keen on much better transport infrastructure across the north. They're talking about the danger of a branch line economy. The trade unions we've had letters from, they're very keen on transport infrastructure investment. The business communities are interested in transport infrastructure investment. It seems that everybody wants this, yet decision from Whitehall has let us down. The Prime Minister was asked by the Managing Director of Transport North East, specifically, obviously, because it was in the north of the Port of Tyne, about the investment in the Leamside line. And the Prime Minister's answers all focused on the M62 and south. Yet again, it seems that people in Whitehall don't understand where Newcastle and the North East are. So, briefly, the Leamside line is the preferred option in the NPR plan. Our connectivity is limited to 6 trains an hour at the moment. The Prime Minister was saying we don't want to be carving through huge swathes of virgin countryside. The Leamside line was opened in 1856, 165 years ago. The infrastructure is still there. There is nothing new or greenfield that needs to be done. The entire thing can be electrified and reopened for £600 million. He talked about improved journey times, but the reality is those improved journey times, there's a little caveat on page 84 of the IRP, because I read everything, and it says, subject to stopping patterns. We're already having to fight off timetable changes that are going to stop the trains from Liverpool coming right the way through the north to Edinburgh. As a result, the people of Berwick, Morpeth, Newcastle, Durham and Darlington will see trains go past them but not be able to get on and off them. What the hell is the point of that? The trains won't run any faster if you let people on them. So we're also missing out, unless the Leamside line reopens, in places like rural Northumberland, where we want to be opening a new station in Belford to serve rural communities. Because rural transport, a very large rural area, the place I represent, as are lots of other people here, and it really matters. It needs people in Sunderland and Washington, Britain's largest town that is not anywhere on the rail network, can be connected, as well as into our local mass transit system. Our area is 2 million people. This is not a small place. And we are getting, from this IRP, nothing. We've heard about the climate impacts, we've heard about the economic impacts. The IRP is full of coulds and shoulds. It's piecemeal. We heard from Tim's report earlier. It might talk about rail, but it's neither integrated nor is it a plan. On page 114, it talks about that we might get the Leamside line as some possible future city region. This is a branch line economy approach and saying that the North East and the East Coast Main Line is going to be treated like a branch line, where we have to find some way of funding it from regional resources. TfN does terrific work with its capacity and its planning and its modelling, and I do think that that is under threat, and that's something we must fight to protect. I think, given that the government has said very clearly that they wish to protect the Union with Scotland, and the area I represent directly borders that, cutting the funding or condemning us to a Victorian East Coast Main Line is probably one of the easiest ways to convince Scotland that Whitehall and Westminster don't take them seriously. 106 billion on HS2, 18 billion on Crossrail, billions and billions of more under the schemes. Now, we're talking about, for example, that the western leg will get as far as Cheshire. But that's not going to help the people of Cheshire get to Newcastle. It's not going to help the people of Newcastle get to Cheshire. Or the people of Carlisle get to Lancaster, or Lancaster get to Hull. We are a region, and we need to be a regional network. And when we talk about union and independence from Scotland, I'll tell you what, I'm getting so hacked off that I'm thinking the best thing we can do is get all of this money devolved to the north and let us decide how to spend it.
That's a very good idea. I'll make a note of that. Maybe that needs to be part of the motion. Okay, so next I've got Martin Gannon.
I'll second what Jamie said. I agree with the comment from Darren saying that we couldn't be sort of like just competing against. It's like a Monty Python sketch, isn't it? I used to dream about sleeping in the middle of the road in half a freight line. And it takes some doing, doesn't it, to unify a Scouser and a Geordie with West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire. Okay, I suppose if you treat everybody equally as badly, then you're going to unify people. Okay, but I think it's sort of just to put things in perspective about why are we so angry? Right? We came together across the whole of the north with a vision, which was about the economic prospects of the entire north. Okay, a pan-north economic vision. Not just for the benefit of the north, but to the benefit of the nation. The pent-up, frustrated potential capacity in the northeast of in the north of England is something which damages the entire country. It damages the national economy. We could all score points about how much infrastructure investment is going into London and the southeast. How much was Crossrail, Thameslink? But the fact is that the government talked about levelling up, okay? And it was about, we came together as a group of organisations around that vision. And that's why we're so disappointed. That's why we're so angry. Tim says that the technical and financial detail it's difficult to quantify, and we haven't actually got the deals. I mean, unlike the plans that we put together, which are costed, we looked at the financial benefits, the added value in terms of to our own economies, improving the quality of life and income of our residents, improving their quality of life, but also the benefits to the country. As opposed to that, there is no technical economic detail to this plan. Frankly, I just don't think it exists. I think it consists of, well, you can deliver it 10 years earlier, and the streets of Peppa Pig World are very safe. Okay? Actually, in the northeast of England, it will be delivered sooner than 10 years early, because on the basis that they put absolutely nothing in whatsoever for the northeast of England, it can be delivered immediately. And actually, taking up Steve's point, maybe if they'd given us nothing at all, the Prime Minister could have stood there and said, well, Peppa Pig's World is a wonderful place with lots of streets, safe streets, and we're going to deliver the integrated rail plan tomorrow, because you're going to get nothing. That's why we're so angry. We're getting literally absolutely nothing. I'm sorry to, this competitive disadvantage. The perspective from the northeast of England is really straightforward. Okay, as Jamie's outlined, the capacity, we have 2 rails running into the northeast of England, 2 lines, right? So north of North Allerton, the track goes down from 4 tracks down to 2. Anyone who's stood in York Station and waited to leave, it's because of that, okay, right? And that means that we've got local freight, you've got freight, local trains, and the intercity express trains compete on the same line. We had a ridiculous situation last year where LNER started consultation on improving the service to London. Absolutely laudable. It's a very valuable asset, the intercity trains to London. They talked about increasing the number of trains from 3 an hour either way, so 6 trains an hour. Actually, in reality, you could probably put 4 trains an hour each way from Newcastle to London. In fact, and taken out the intermediate stops, because the trains would literally run at the back of each other. Slow freight trains and slow local trains with intercity trains coming up behind them. So you end up with a ridiculous situation where Darlington, the birthplace of the railway, which has been, has a, I'm not, well, enter the murky world of politics, but as a Conservative council, as a Conservative mayor of Tees Valley, a Conservative member of Parliament, and has had substantial promises of investment in the station and commitment to move Treasury Office northeast to Darlington, faced the prospect of having that substantial investment in the station to watch the trains go by, because they weren't going to stop at Darlington station. So, the The urgent need for the North East of England was the reopening of the Laneside line, which has been eloquently expressed by Jamie. The level of disappointment from every single part of the North is palpable. One of the comments I've made is, I know the government's cut back on its foreign aid budget, but do they actually realise that the North of England is part of the UK? That we pay taxes, that we pay national insurance, and that our companies and organisations pay corporation tax. We contribute into the national exchequer. All we expect is fairness and justice.
Thank you very much. So next I've got Don. Did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sorry that I'm going to, I think, break the habit, and I'm going to say things maybe a little bit more positively about what lies before us. I think if I were a member of the DFT or a member of the government and listening in to what's been said today, well-rehearsed political statements, in some cases in order to promote personal political ambitions, I would want as little to do with this board as possible. We're supposed to be critical friends of the Department for Transport, but frankly we come across as a critical enemy. I'm here to represent the interests primarily of the travelling public of North Yorkshire. And I believe in this £96 billion IRP, there are many things there that my residents can celebrate. Certainly we were supportive of the eastern leg of HS2, but its cancellation will bring additional investment in the East Coast Main Line, which runs straight through our county. It will reduce journey times from York to King's Cross by 14 minutes, from York to Birmingham by 37 minutes, and even a short journey to Newcastle by 7 minutes. But this upgrade of the East Coast Main Line will also bring other benefits. I won't speak on behalf of the member for the City of York here, but it will bring about improvements in digital signalling. And the digital signalling team for Network Rail is based in York. We'll see longer trains by 3 carriages. We'll see more 140 mile per hour working on the East Coast Main Line and an increase in the train paths. Yes, we're aware of the fact that the East Coast Main Line is down to 2 tracks north of Northallerton, Northallerton being, of course, our county town. But I believe there will be improvements there. I live in a town called Harrogate. It's only 75,000 people. We have 7 direct services by Azuma to King's Cross every day. I do have sympathy for a huge city like Bradford, and indeed we would like to see Bradford brought much more into the Northern Rail network. But I don't believe the opportunities of this board are well served by these well-rehearsed, ever more negative statements and disappointments in the IRP. And incidentally, before we start talking about what a terrible document it is, I think we should await and see what the technical reasoning behind it is. Because the other thing the residents of North Yorkshire want to see is value for money. And it's all very well dishing out billions and billions of pounds for all of these schemes, but are they worth our taxpayers' money? So I'm sorry to break the chain here of negative statements, but those are the views as far as North Yorkshire County Council are concerned.
Thank you very much. Charlie?
A little Tory double. How about that then? So I feel extremely conflicted with all of this because obviously I am and represent a very red wall Tory area. And the greatest conflict that we have as Lancashire is I'm going to undo 600 years of history and undo the War of the Roses right now and actually say that Lancashire is absolutely gutted for Yorkshire, for what has transpired in some parts of the plan. And I do think that Bradford, especially Hull, have lost out. And I think that there is work for us to do to make sure that we continue to put forward the positive case for Bradford, for Hull. And I'd like to see that positivity in the motion. And the most important thing from my perspective, as Tim said in his thing, is about that technical documentation. I don't know why it wasn't published at the time, but I think it's really important that it is published, and it is published as soon as possible. And at that point, we need our teams to dissect it and go through it. And I think that's something that we need to really understand, is that technical side of things. And there is more to come. There's the Union Connectivity Review, and there's obviously the latest RNEP and the funding package that Network Rail's can have. And I think at that point, when we have all of that information, we need to make sure that our one voice continues to push for what we need to push for. I've got a couple of what I'd like to think of friendly suggestions that I'd like us to push as an organisation. I think firstly, and most importantly, is we need to fill the void. If we don't know, if they say we're now a co-sponsor, Transport for the North is a co-sponsor, and we've been saying, oh, what is a co-sponsor? We need to define that role ourselves. We need to, I think what I would like to see is that TFN as an organisation sits on the project boards and is on the delivery boards of every part of the IRP, in whatever it looks like. If it stays at £96 billion and doesn't get increased, I want to make sure that every penny that has been allocated stays in the north. If any of it, if there's an underspend in any way, I want that money to stay here. And I'd like that to be put in the letter that we've sent to the Secretary of State. But then I'd also like us to redefine what Transport for the North's role is moving forward. So I would like us to identify, map, champion every single one of the Restoring Your Railways funding bids. What good is for Lancashire is me being in this meeting? Because the IRP didn't really touch Lancashire, and as a patriotic organisation that Lancashire County Council is, we didn't mind that, because we see every bit of investment in the north is good for, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, isn't it? So for us, we didn't really lose out of the IRP announcement, because we never really gained much from the IRP, apart from, obviously, the HS2 link to Chester. Which, by the way, for the last 5 years in the Conservative Party, we get hammered all the time with scrap HS2, scrap HS2. We've had that for years. So the fact that that's not happened is a massive win for all of us in comparison to where it could have gone. But no, I want us to, when it comes to Restoring Your Railways, I need to make sure that Fleetwood to Poulton is championed by this group, and Skipton to Colne, and the Skelmersdale, Lincoln Skelmersdale. I'm sorry, Jamie, but you mentioned that you've got the biggest town without a railway station. Skelmersdale say the same thing, so we're going to have some kind of arbitration about that. Yeah, and Lee as well. Lee said the same. You know, and the South Fylde Loop, Clive Road to Hellerfield. You know, every single one of these. I need you guys to champion investment in Lancashire. Great British Railways being in the north. I'd like that again to be put in writing in every single thing we talk about. That has got to be one of, I know it's a consolation prize, but it has to be one of them. And I'd like, Lancashire are looking at how we can put in a bid as well. So to add in a fourth bid maybe. I'd be very grateful that that is put in black and white. And finally, I just think that we need to, as an organisation, I understand, as Don said, it's nice that we can have this chance to vent, but at some point the venting's got to stop. Is this the end of Northern Powerhouse Rail, or is this the beginning? How are we going to positively own the dialogue, own the space as a co-sponsor? How are we going to improve the IRP? How are we going to make sure that it does talk about freight and logistics? How are we going to make sure it does decarbonise the economy of the north? What I really dislike about all of this is 2 weeks ago it was COP26. That's the bit that really frustrates me out of this. So how can we own the space now? The venting's got to stop at some point. Now we've got to work collaboratively and build. So that's what I've got to say.
Thank you. Just while we're on the talking about Lancashire, I had Mark Rawston, who's from the Lancashire LEP, couldn't attend today, so he asked me to read out a statement from him. So he said, I would like to share with you my utter disappointment at the total lack of ambition demonstrated in the IRP, a real missed opportunity to develop a coordinated approach to transport connectivity across the north. From a business perspective, this will mean real economic and other regeneration opportunities are, at absolute best, not maximised and more realistically will be missed altogether. The lack of emphasis on freight and port-to-port connectivity is a huge missed opportunity to show leadership in economic strategy. The private sector would respond with real cash and action if strategic investment was supported. So thanks to Mark for that. So I've now got Dan Jarvis.
Thanks very much, Chair. Let me just firstly record my thanks to Team TFN for all the work that they've done in corralling us to this point. I know that it's much appreciated. Let me also just say I think it's a great shame that there isn't a minister here today. It's always a pleasure to see officials from the department, but I think it is a pretty poor show, to say the least, that given the concerns that were inevitably going to be articulated today, that a minister has not got on the train and come to me and listen to the points that we're seeking to make. Look, I'm conscious of time, so I won't labour my thoughts, but I do share the deep dismay that other colleagues have expressed. It's impossible, I think, to overstate the anger of the people that I represent who thought that there was a once-in-a-generation opportunity to stop tinkering and start transforming. And I think my great frustration is I thought that we had a plan. I thought that we had a deal and an agreement in place. Senior government ministers looked me in the eye and said that they were going to do this, and then they didn't do it. And I think that is deeply dishonourable, and we will be living with the consequences of that probably for generations to come, because the great tragedy of all of this is this was our moment. This was our time to shape the railways and our transport infrastructure across the north for the better for potentially the next 100 years. And that opportunity, I fear, has been missed. And great uncertainty remains in South Yorkshire. Other parts of the country have rightly expressed the concern about the impact that this will have on them. We're really worried in South Yorkshire because significant uncertainty remains. No clarity about vital transport artery links between Sheffield and Leeds. No clarity about the vital link through the Hope Valley line to Manchester. What kind of integrated rail plan is not in a position to provide clarity about important connectivity links between the great cities of the north of England? So that is deeply frustrating. Further concerns exist about the clarity of the commitment towards new stations in the Dearne Valley and at Rotherham. And also concern remains about the continued blight and impact on those communities like Mexborough in Doncaster and Bramley in Rotherham, the impact that the HS2 line had previously had and continues to have against those communities there. So I think huge concern from South Yorkshire, share the concerns that people have expressed around the north, but also just to try and sort of distill that into some positive steps and thinking about how we move forward. I think it is very important that we seek to remain united as a board so that a strong, clear message comes from this meeting that we don't think that the plans that have been laid by the government are acceptable, but there is a determination and a commitment to work with all parties to try and secure a better deal. I think there will be conversations taking place in Parliament today, may well be a vote at some point in the near future. So I don't consider this matter to be at an end. I think there are big questions still that remain. But the more that collectively we can stick together, be unified and speak with one voice, the better the chance that we have of actually seeking to kind of improve our lot. And the final point I would just make, whilst of course predominantly this was a huge opportunity for the north of England, as others have reflected, actually it's about the whole country as well. You know, our country will only be successful if we unlock the huge potential that we know exists within the north. And I deeply regret the fact that the integrated rail plan has missed a massive opportunity to unlock that potential. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Dan, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick few points from myself from my representative of North East Lincolnshire. I can understand the frustration that everybody actually has with this, but I've got to say I agree in part with Don that a lot of this is going to be to the benefit of North East Lincolnshire and Lincolnshire in a whole. But then again, I'm concerned about the freight side of things. Because obviously you'd expect me from the ports of Grimsby, Immingham, Hull, Goole, that we would have a concern about the freight side of things. Darren is quite right when we talk about the CO2 of the Humber. And it's important that we take that into account when we're talking about the decarbonisation side of things a bit later on. But what concerns me is that Immingham alone, it's not the largest port, but it still holds the record for the amount of import and export of goods into the country. It's still the largest port for that. And we take on board what's going to be happening with the free port status of the Humber. That's going to increase dramatically with the freight. And we've got to take this on board and talk about it. There is a lot of frustration amongst members here, and I can understand that, and you will actually fight for your own rights. But I think we've all got to understand that we've got to be united as a board in what we do to try and see what's happened in the past and put it right. But as I say, I'm more concerned at the moment about the freight side of things, which represented the Humber. We've already had one disappointment in another field, is the direct line that we was promised from Cleethorpes through to London. And that's been obviously put on the back burner yet again, which would have improved things for the communities and the resorts of Cleethorpes. But, you know, I hope that this board will stick together, Chair, and be united, even though you've got different views on what you believe is right and what is wrong. So I'd hope that we can be united in sending the message across that there is disappointment within the RIP. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have got Nick Bisson here from DFT, but I'm going to ask Andy, because I haven't got anyone else on the list, just to move the motion. And I think there's a few little tweaks and twiddles we might need to do to get consensus. So, Andy.
Certainly, Chair. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's imperfect, and I'm sure it can be strengthened. I suppose I should start by saying what the motion is trying to do, and be clear what it's not trying to do. What it's trying to do is plot a way forward from here. So actually, picking up on the positive contribution from Charlie, and in some ways acknowledging some of what Don said, although I don't think it's fair, Don, to criticise people for expressing the feelings of having expectations raised and then abandoned. I think that it's legitimate for people, I think, to express how they feel about that. However, it is trying to plot a way forward, Chair, recognising that we can't solve everything in the motion, and actually, we are all feeling disappointment. Now, from my perspective, we've probably done better than anywhere, so I think I need to acknowledge that. The north-south side of things, obviously, is a step forward, although I have to say, we are not getting an underground station, and people might say, oh, well, but if we're going to boost Manchester as a centre of the north, it needs to have the full economic potential of the centre of Manchester unlocked. But more than that, we're still being asked to contribute to HS2. Nowhere else in the country is asked to pay towards HS2, and we still are being asked to make a major contribution to the airport station, when obviously stations all over the country are being built at central government expense. So, but that's not in the motion. And this is what the motion is not trying to do. It's not trying to capture everything that everyone feels, because there are other fora in which people can make those points. I completely sympathise with Darren in terms of Hull, left off the map. I completely sympathise with Jamie around the Leamside line. The North East, I think, gets the rawest of deals out of everywhere, to be honest, and I think that needs to be acknowledged. Also picking up colleagues' points from North East Links, that we understand, and Hull absolutely understand those points. I just want to be clear that what this motion is trying to do is take what we've got in the IRP and see how it can be made better. And actually, to pick up a point Charlie made, sometimes, even if the infrastructure isn't physically going to your area, having the core of the north connected by a more 21st century infrastructure will truly benefit everywhere. In fact, it will benefit everywhere without the disruption going to the areas that don't have to have the new infrastructure. The areas, as Steve was saying, that are on the line get a lot of disruption in the building, and this is why it does benefit everybody. And actually, getting benefits without disruption, I think, isn't necessarily a bad deal, if I could put it that way. So, Chair, to kind of come to the heart of it, as a board, we have always prioritised the east-west connectivity across the north. I think that is something that unites us. I would say it's the single biggest transport challenge facing this country. It's the poorest. You could argue about Devon, Cornwall, but given the economic potential of the north, to have connectivity of the kind that we do, that doesn't connect the two great ports of Liverpool and Hull properly, that puts pretty much everything on the M62, that gives people very lengthy journeys if they're traveling, if you're going from Liverpool to Newcastle. I mean, that is a massive problem for the country, and isn't a sustainable situation, in my view. And we've got to say, well, is this plan good enough, the one we've been presented with regard to the east-west connectivity, given that that's a challenge that we are all united on? Or would this board be criticised by future generations in the north for not having stuck out, actually, for a solution that was good enough? And personally, I feel that is where we would be as a board if we just went, oh, well, this is all we're going to get, let's accept it. I don't think we can do that. I think it fails on three tests: capacity, connectivity and disruption. From a capacity point of view, to take a new line east from Manchester and connect it with congested Victorian infrastructure at Marsden speaks to me, without even seeing the detail that Tim was calling for, speaks suboptimal to me, and problematic is what that says to me. How do you actually do that? What is the logic for taking half a new line into very creaking Victorian infrastructure? And I can't see how that immediately makes sense. And as the motion tries to say, it will not deliver the capacity uplift that the north desperately needs. The new line is far superior from that point of view. That then leads to the disruption point. It's going to be much more disruptive in the building if you attempt this solution than if you were to build an entirely new line, where that could be obviously kept separate from the corridor where services will need to be running through permanently. We can't, accept a massive disruption to what is the primary corridor, rail corridor between the east of the north and the west of the north. So, from a disruption point of view, it is very inferior. But then it's that key point about connectivity, and the motion touches on this. Bradford is a proud northern city. Are we really saying that we have no more ambition for it as a country? And I am looking at the department when I say this. Are we really saying that we have no more ambition for Bradford than what is put forward in the plan? I mean, if we are, I just think that is a dreadful state of affairs. It is a divisive situation, isn't it? It's sending a message to people living in Bradford, truly, that they're not even second-class citizens, because they're not even getting the downgraded solution. They are getting pretty much nothing, third-class, whatever, forgotten. And I say it again, I've spoken up for Bradford, but I'm going to do it again. They're important to us as much as West Yorkshire, because many people travel between Greater Manchester and Bradford on a regular basis. It genuinely is nowhere near good enough for them, and we should not accept it, because it would be fundamentally wrong to do it. So, Chair, to try and then take where this gets us, I think the solution is flawed, deeply flawed, and fails the biggest test that this board has always set, the prioritisation of east-west connectivity across the north. However, it isn't just about complaining, it is trying to draw a way forward. And the way forward that is proposed here is that we write asking for a process of mediation, where, to change the nature of the conversation to this point, I would be prepared to consider local contribution, or ways of unlocking local contribution to improve what is being proposed and to get us towards the right solution. If we were to have a new line via Bradford, between Manchester and Leeds, clearly there would be land value uplift across all of that line. And therefore there is an opportunity to unlock a contribution to the overall cost of the line. I didn't hear any minister last week say anything other than cost was the reason why we could not have a new line via Bradford. Now, if that is the case, let us sit down with ministers and talk about how we bridge that gap. And we think of it in like in the Mersey Tunnel context, how you do it as a country over a long period of time where funds are paid back. We shouldn't have to do that, in my view, because other parts of the country aren't doing that. But I want the right solution, and I'm trying to find ways in which we can get there. Similarly, if you look at the Liverpool station request, again, it would lift values there. So I've talked to Steve about this. Shouldn't there be a contribution? In my view, it should be fully funded. But actually, if Liverpool is prepared to consider a local contribution to getting the right station there, then I think that is a step forward from where we are. Dan rightly raised the point about the Hope Valley line. And again, I think you could amend this motion to bring that point in, to see if that could be treated in the same way, and have a kind of a new conversation where we're looking more seriously at local contribution. So that's what I've tried to do in the motion, Chair, and I don't think actually what I'm proposing here goes against what Don said, or indeed what Charlie said. It is an attempt to unify this board. We have been discussing these matters for years, actually, since I've been elected, and what we got last week was a different solution imposed on us without input from us. So that's why we're all kind of in a confused position. What this is trying to do is say, from here, through you, Chair, amend this motion if need be, and I think it can be improved, by the way, but then go back to ask for that process of mediation to see if there is other solutions, particularly around financing, that could be put forward to the government that allows that new line, particularly, for me, that is the priority here, to get that new line via Bradford back on the table. I do not believe we can possibly admit defeat on that issue at this point in time. To do so would be to fail generations to come in the north of England. And as Dan said, we would be accepting a smaller economy in the north of England for the rest of our lives. And this is not politics, and I hope nobody will see it as such. This is about us doing what is right for this part of the world, a part of the world that we all believe in. It does deserve better than what has been put on the table. And I pass the motion back to you, Chair, to maybe I'd move it if you like, and also though hand the floor back to you to see if you believe it can be improved on the back of some of the comments from board members this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And I believe I've got two seconders for the motion as it stands at the moment, Tracey and Steve. Just picking up on some of the points and thinking about your idea, Andy, about finance and how we can get other funding is not what we've been saying all along. It's always about the whole of MPR rather than bits of it. So if the prize is the whole of MPR, is that where we want to get the money to come in for the whole system, not just bits and bobs of it? And I would suggest, we've heard Mark from Lancashire LEP saying that private business would come in. So if that is the prize for the North, the delivery of MPR in full, I think we need to make that very clear in our motion. So one of the things I was going to suggest, in the bit that said this board resolves, rather than the list of the thing, we just delivery of the preferred Northern Powerhouse Rail network. So rather than pick off bits of it, we need to have the whole network. That's our ambition.
Absolutely, Chair.
Is that okay?
That's absolutely right.
We haven't talked about decarbonisation, and there's an amazing strategy coming forward later that has got so much evidence in that. We've already said that MPR is going to take 58,000 cars off the road. This will have, by not delivering MPR, will have a massive impact on the country's ambitions for net zero. And, and we talked about polluting Humberside. Well, Cheshire West, the fourth most polluting, and it's about freight and all of that. So I think we need to be really strong on the carbon bit of that, and I'll come back to that in a minute. I have had another bullet that I've been asked to put in. So we've, on this version that you've got in front of you, we've sort of put the ask into bullets. So I've got an extra bullet from Dan Jarvis, which says that the proposals give no solution to improve connectivity between Leeds and Sheffield, Yorkshire's two largest cities that are home to 1.4 million people and are only 30 miles apart. Are we happy to put that in? Okay. And then I've got another one. So I've got all these bits of information everywhere. Another bullet, that the reopening of the mothballed Leamside line was TfN's preferred option for MPR. For £600 million, it would improve the current constraints of 6 trains per hour on ECML north of Northallerton. Happy with that extra bullet? Yes. Are you fine with these bullets? I've been for, yes, I'm happy. If there's any other bullets, I'm happy to take them. It's just easier to have it as a sort of a statement, I think.
Yeah. Just one other bullet,
yes.
If I may. Just to pick on the point that Andy made about reflecting the connectivity between Manchester and Sheffield, Sheffield and Manchester by the Hope Valley line.
Okay. So what, right, okay. That was a swerve ball, that one. Okay. So we need some improving connectivity between the... Do you want, can you give me some words for it? Yeah, we'll come back to you, Dan. Darren, did you want to...
You know what I'm going to say. To ensure that the Hull and East Yorkshire LEP area, namely the city of Hull and East Yorkshire, East Riding Unitary Authority area, are reconnected to the Trans-Pennine main line and plans for re-electrification are as part of east-west coastal links for both passenger and decarbonised freight.
Is that written on a piece of paper there?
It is, but...
Can you pass it to Mark? Okay, Martin's trying to collate it all. Thank you. So, any other bullets from anybody? Have we covered everything? And just while we're all sort of collating those and considering it, if I hand over, have you got something else you wanted to add, Dan? Another one?
When they're just responding to your challenge to provide a form of words,
okay.
Perhaps rather than specifically relating to the connectivity between Leeds and Sheffield, we could refer to improving connectivity on the corridors, including Sheffield and Leeds, Manchester and Sheffield, but also Sheffield and Hull as well.
Okay. Okay. Yes, Keith.
Good morning. Just on behalf of colleagues along the West Coast, the Colburn link is obviously something that's going to be vitally important to us. And I know it's mentioned and it's in various documents, but there's also a possibility of an alternative. So I don't know whether anybody can give us any assurances that this is what's going to be there, but it's important for the west of the northwest that that link is maintained.
So part of the motion is proposing a letter, and I think we've already seen sort of a draft version of that, but I think there's a lot of things that have come out of today that we can add into the letter about our role as a co-sponsor, things like restoring British Railways, all the other things that are suddenly part of the overall picture really should come into us in TfN.
Chair, I just want to say that as much as I like to list out every single proposal, I'm particularly keen to see the commitment to the Leamside line included, so I can go back to the North East and say, look, it's in the motion. I think there's a danger that we make the thing confusing and too listy. I think that if the wording says there that we want to say we want mediation and to enter into discussions about the preferred Northern Powerhouse proposals, and I think it is sufficient that we leave it at that. We know we have the agreement. We've spent months and years and thousands of hours agreeing what the preferred option is, and I think we're fully aware of what they include. I just think if we start listing everything that thus far has been excluded, we'll be here all day and it'll end up with several pages.
Okay, Andy.
Just to agree with Martin on that, Chair, I think I'll go back to what I said at the start. You know, I recognise this motion was not trying to solve everything that's wrong with the IRP. That wasn't the intention. And you know, the letter, the broader letter, can capture all of the very legitimate points, by the way. And I'm not saying that they're not. Just to be clear, the motion was about the core east-west NPR network, pretty much as it relates to the core cities of the north, although not excluding Warrington or other towns that benefit. But it's that infrastructure that will actually benefit everybody as well, though, by the way, won't it? Because it will take capacity off, it will relieve existing lines as well. So I do agree with Martin, that it's really important that we don't make this a shopping list motion, because it's not intended to be that. Just a thought, Chair, because I know the Prime Minister spoke in his speech that people have mentioned about Crossrail for the North, which was an odd thing for him to talk about, given what's been announced. But I think I've admitted at this board before, Crossrail was something that I brought together as Chief Secretary to the Treasury, but it's actually not a bad example to use, because there was local contribution to Crossrail, and we should acknowledge that. We make the points at this board sometimes about London this, that. Now, London has a bigger potential to raise contribution to new infrastructure, but they did raise a contribution for Crossrail, and I think there was a local council taxpayer contribution to Crossrail. So I think there is merit, I think, in saying all of the things that we're looking for, we are prepared to consider. No one's committing to anything, but I think it might help us put something on the table, is what I'm trying to say, and rather than present a shopping list and say none of it's good enough. I'm just trying to find a way that moves us from where we are to a better place, if I could put it that way.
Yeah, can I just bring Martin in? So I think if we change the resolution first bullet to network rather than the list of things, and then I think there are 3 bullets that from the North East, from Sheffield and from Hull, but Martin.
Chair, if I might suggest, I think we can capture some of these points that people have made under the section that's headed "The Board Recognises," but I think the point that Councillor Gannon's making and Mayor Burnham is making, you've got those 2 resolutions at the bottom, which are the drivers here. One is which you're suggesting about the Chair would write, and that would be statutory advice from this board to the Secretary of State about asking for a process of mediation, which under the amendments you've all agreed, that would be around the core and the preferred Northern Powerhouse Rail. So that's all encompassing. So I think that would pick up the points that colleagues have made. You've also got in there a resolution that you would ask me to bring back a report to the board on the impact of integrated rail plan on the North economic ambitions. That's obviously an opportunity for us to bring back a more detailed understanding about the technical stuff that we've talked about. But Chair, I would also say that I need to bring a report back to you at your next board to pick up on some of these unknowns that we've talked about. So what is the role of co-sponsor? And again, I think Mayor Burnham's made the point that actually, depending on the kind of model you have, then the type of co-sponsorship relationship will be different. So I think I need to bring that back to you as the next board. So I think that picks up on the point from Councillor Edwards as well, that there's a further conversation to be had, which would also allow us to have the conversation with officials.
Tracey.
Thank you. Just picking up on Andy's point about what this is all for, that east-west connectivity, Northern Powerhouse Rail with Bradford at the heart of it. If I could just reiterate that Bradford, central Bradford on the Northern Powerhouse Rail network, it really needs to be clear in this, because that is at the heart of that we are being given an upgrade rather than a new line, and it is the new line with Bradford stop in Bradford that will connect Manchester and Leeds. It's so important, and the motivation for me to drive this forward, if we could have that clarity, if there's any sort of editing of this going forward, that Bradford on the line would be really vital. Thank you.
Can I just endorse that point, if you don't mind, just to pick up on it, because it's a very important point. And the point I just want to make is, so the board is aware of this, Manchester Airport say to me that if Bradford is on the new line, the case for local contribution is actually potentially there, because of what that means, given the benefit to Manchester Airport of Bradford being on that line, because obviously those passengers can go south to catch flights. So Bradford, actually, when you include Bradford, the ability to make local contribution massively increases, and that would be true of Bradford city centre. Would there be land value uplift? it makes the point, you see, the better you make it, the more you can capture local contribution, I suppose, is the point I'm making. And I fully endorse the points that Tracey made about Bradford. It does need to be pulled out in the bullets as a particular concern. But not just for connectivity and fairness, it's about you unlock the contribution that I'm talking about in the motion. I just think that's really important for us to say. Manchester Airport say to me, they can't make the contribution on the back of the line via Marsden, because it just doesn't, where does the contribution come from? But if you lift the quality of what's done, then the contribution becomes much more possible to make. And I think that's a really key point that mustn't be missed in this.
I quite agree. I don't think we're suggesting taking anything out. And actually, the Bradford bullet might be better further up. Thank you. Okay, so while we're just working this out, Nick, sorry that you've got the worst job probably of anyone in the room to actually say something. I'll come back to you, Darren, in a minute.
Is that on now? Yeah. Thanks, Chair. I think for the purposes of today, it's probably right that I confine myself to matters of factual record. But as the comments were made around the room, there were just a few things that I felt were worth kind of clarifying or coming back to. I'll start, if I may, with phasing and with the diagram that Tim presented, which I hadn't seen before. The timescales shown in the integrated rail plan are for the opening of different schemes and for the realisation of passenger benefits. They're not intended to be for construction, which would have predated that. The critical path to realising the benefits on the sort of central NPR route through Manchester is completing the HS2 line into Manchester and Piccadilly Station, and then having got powers for and constructed the sections of new line either side. I don't think there is, in reality, a future in which the proposals in the IRP would take longer than the proposals that TfN has made to transact, not least because you would actually be building less new line on one side. That was probably the first one. I think Mayor Braden asked about the £200 million and the Leeds work, and just to sort of clarify there, and Ben, kick me if I'm getting this wrong, there is 100 million included in the Sustainable Transport Settlement for West Yorkshire. There is a further 100 both to look at how best to get HS2 into Leeds and to further support the work on the Metro, which we will want to talk to West Yorkshire colleagues about, how best that is handled, channelled and managed. But that is a work programme to be defined and to come. Mayor Rotherham asked about the Liverpool journey times. The journey times presented are on a consistent stopping pattern of both for the different options. So I don't think there's anything, I don't think there is a difference in there. They've all, as to the best of my knowledge, assumed a Warrington and a Manchester Airport call. And the trebling of capacity is in line with the options put forward through TfN. It refers to the number of, it refers to the seating plus standing capacity on the trains, not to the number of trains. There was a suggestion that the IRP had struck various things out. I think, as it sets out, the government has sought an adaptive approach in line with the NIC recommendation, so it has started with this set of proposals within the 96 billion, and it acknowledges that actually, as others have said, there is the potential to come around what happens after that, or in addition to that. There was a question about Crewe North connection. I can confirm that within the IRP, funding has been included for the delivery of Crewe North connection as part of the Phase 2B Western Leg Bill. There is a caveat that the government has yet to respond to the separate design refinement consultation that has taken place on Phase 2B, and therefore, in terms of a response to those who took part in that consultation, and particularly those whose land holdings are affected, it remains subject to ratification of the design when we do that consultation response. In terms of TfN's role as co-sponsor, there was a request that TfN be allowed to help define that. We would very much welcome that, and indeed I feel that we took the suggestion from a paper this board considered last January. On the northeast, the investment on the East Coast main line is likely greater than would otherwise have been the case. I think that's probably worth clarifying. And on the question of what does the western leg do for the northeast, which was raised, Actually, if you look at some of the journey times and benefits quoted, then there is an assumed reduction in the time taken to get from Newcastle and the North East to Manchester, but also to Birmingham, and that is based on the extension of the HS2 Curzon Street services to Manchester, to Leeds, and beyond. I'm almost done. I'm happy to say, to answer the questions on South Yorkshire, that within the work to be done on how best to get HS2 trains into Leeds, we do anticipate Sheffield to Leeds and the associated new stations on that line being in scope. I think, Chair, but I hope that's just helpful in making sure that as far as I can, we have a sort of factual position on the minutes.
Yes, thanks very much. In terms of the technical information, do you know when that's going to be released?
No, but I have noted the question.
Okay, because we need to be able to compare so that we can actually look with our team of experts that we have, who I'm sure are dying to look at it all. Just interestingly, on the Liverpool to Manchester one, that the information that we've actually looked at says that we don't think the actual journey time will be any better under the IRP than it currently is now. So the best current time is between 35 to 51 minutes. We had an aspirational target of 20, and NPR we were thinking about 29, but now it's looking like it's only 35. So it's that sort of information that we need.
And some of that is in the report, but that's 30... sorry, I'm just going to get you the number exactly right. That's 35 to Piccadilly, which of course is 50-something minutes today. But, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Chair, can I just have a point of clarification on something Nick said? Sorry, I don't want to, it's a very quick one. Nick mentioned a paper that went to this board in January about co-sponsor. I am not aware that we ever endorsed any such suggestion. I just need to have clarification on that point, because it seems like it's being suggested that we did endorse that.
That was an option.
But I don't believe this board ever did, but I'd just be grateful if the Chief Executive might just clarify that point.
If I might, Chair, I think Mayor Burnham's correct that you did have a conversation around the options and variety of potential mechanisms, but my understanding is you did not formally consider or resolve that that was your preferred way forward. That is, Chair, what I was alluding to, that I do need to bring back to you a paper on the governance, and in particular what that means, so that we're all very clear what would be in scope as a co-sponsor and what would not be in scope, so there's no avoidance there. But you have not had that substantive debate yet.
Sorry, I did not mean to imply that you had that.
Right, so Steve, you had your hand up first, then I've got Don and Charlie. We are very short of time because we've got partnership board at 2 and we've got some really important things, so speak quickly.
I'll be brief rather than speaking quickly. I always get accused of that anyway. Look, the verbal clarification is really helpful in regard to the points that are being raised today, but it does suggest that there's information that we are not privy to, and that's part of the problem on the confusion, if there is confusion, around the table. So what I think we need is, if there's technical detail, which you seem to be confirming, Nick, available, how quickly can we get it? Not whether we should, but how quickly do we get this information so that our teams can work on that? I would say that we should expect it today.
Yeah.
Just to go back, on NPR, the work that we have used is what was done by Network Rail for TfN and the department as co-clients at the moment. But we can, I'm happy to assist in the sort of unpacking of that with Tim, if that helps.
So just to clarify, you used our evidence? Right, okay. I'm confused now. Sorry. Okay, so I've got Don, Charlie, Darren and Tracey, and then that's it. We need to get this motion done and start talking about saving the plan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would find it much easier to support a resolution which has as few bullet points in it as possible. I think it would be much more effective and actually wouldn't tie the hands of TfN when you go to mediate with the Secretary of State. I would also just like to add, I totally agree with what Andy said about local contributions. In a very small way, an example I can give you from North Yorkshire, we invested with the help of the North Yorkshire Local Enterprise Partnership, using, in our case, parking receipts surpluses. We invested £10 million in the Harrogate to York line in partnership with Network Rail. And within the space of a year, that has delivered a major benefit for our rail travellers because with effect from the 12th of December, the frequency of that service between Harrogate and York will be doubled. So local contributions can be extremely effective.
Thank you. Charlie.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else is a child of divorced parents in this room, but the phrase "a process of mediation," I think I just need a little bit of clarity on what that actually looks like. That doesn't sound to me to be very. It sounds very negative, which I understand, but it also sounds very definite and finite. What happens if the government, one, doesn't agree to a process of mediation, or two, we have it, and something changes or nothing changes, then what happens to TFN after that? Because after a process of mediation, the divorce has happened. Your parents are divorced, and it's the end. You're divorced then. So the question I need to answer, and I think I would like some more wording in this, I'm really sorry, is just to define what TFN is moving forward after the process, after the divorce, after the process of mediation's happened. That's the one thing I really need, if that's okay, is what is TFN afterwards? Because at the moment, that seems to me like if this doesn't happen, what is our role? What is our voice?
Can I just suggest some wording? And I'm not sure. I think that's sort of giving up if we say, well, what happens, if we don't exist? So to ask the Chair of Transport for the North to write to the Secretary of State for Transport, asking him to explore with Transport for the North funding options for the delivery of preferred Northern Powerhouse rail. So are you happy with that?
Yeah. I think so. I mean, I think the point about process of mediation was we were working as two sides and then we've had a solution imposed, haven't we? And it's that kind of thing about what's the evidence, look at the evidence, what's the other... and just so it's a process that actually we can sort of come to a conclusion on, even if it's in the end not... At least it's a proper way of doing things. I mean, that's what I thought we were in as TFN with the government over all of this, and it was almost getting back to that wording I'm not going to hang out on, but I think it's a process where both sides can kind of challenge and sort of put forward ideas, and then, as Steve said, get back together, hopefully. So that was, I mean, it's not ideal wording, but that's what it was intended to do, where somebody, yourself, Chair, or somebody else, 2 or 3 people could go in for us and say, this is how this board sees it, here's the evidence behind it, here's what else we're prepared to put on the table, and then get a response from the government and see if we can come to a new compromise. I mean, that was the proposal.
I quite agree, and it still says that. It just, mediation could mean that we have to bring someone else in to do it on our behalf, but this is us saying, no, we want to talk to you. Yeah. So it's a bit slightly more forceful in a way. Okay, so... Darren.
Just the concerns I do have, back to the people from DFT when they said that no one's been phased out. Well, I'm afraid compared to the proposal on slide 6, Hull, Sheffield, Hull Leeds has definitely been phased out, and it only features in brackets on page 100. Sorry, I read it like Jamie. Page 100 of the document, where in brackets as an afterthought, if the rest of the project's underspend. I'm sure government projects are obviously, there's a tradition of them underspending, isn't there not? Let's be honest about it. So what I'm concerned about, and I'll say this clear, we do want to be in a bullet point saying Hull, because in a sense the Minister has already let the cat out of the bag by saying, well, you'll benefit from improvements to the core network. I mean, Andy said it's about the core network. Well, it isn't about the core network if you're not on it, and you were on it. And I'm afraid for that reason, the North doesn't stop at Leeds. It goes through to Hull, and we have to be mentioned, and I do share my colleagues' view about mediation, I'm afraid, because it's who mediates you in or out, isn't it? Because this plan, if I'm honest about it, and this might be a vaguely non-party point, This is very similar to the core cities proposals when Hull was carved out and the map went to Newcastle and there was no mention of Hull, when other core city leaders back in the time sought to carve Hull out in years gone by. So I'm afraid it's not a party political point, it's a point that I'm fighting for Hull and East Yorkshire here, and I'm not prepared to see what was in a core cities proposals when we weren't even allowed to be a core city years ago and we were carved out, reappear as a government document without the mention of Hull. So I'm afraid for Hull and East Riding, we do want to be part of the bullet point and we do want to be mentioned.
Okay, so the proposal for the bullets are for the recognises bit. So we're going to put, the proposal is we put some extra bullets in, one from Dan, one from Jamie and one from yourself as a bullet under this board recognises. We've got Bradford in there because that's really important. So it's giving each area that we're recognising that as a board. And then there's 2 resolutions because that is what we're going to do. The first one is about saying to the government, right, we want to sit down and talk to you about this and look, in particular, look at alternative funding models, really important. And then the second bullet is about the Chief Exec to prepare a board to the report on the impact of the integrated rail plan on our economic ambitions. And I would suggest we add, and our decarbonisation strategy.
Do that.
And that will depend, obviously, on the technical information. But if it's our technical information anyhow, then we should be able to do it just based on what we've got. So does that sound like something everybody in the room can sign up to? Yes. So in terms of the wording of that, I think we'll if you trust us that we will capture in the big long of bullets.
100%.
Yeah. And so, because I do want to move on, so can you all show those in favour of the motion as I've just described it to say, and I'll vote as well. That's everybody. Thank you, colleagues, so much. That was a really good debate, and I think it's given everyone the opportunity to get things off the chest. And I know and I know a lot of people have done media interviews, and I was like a whirling dervish by the end of Friday and couldn't actually speak. So I think that was really positive. It's shown our unity as the North, and I think that will send a really clear message to government. So thank you, everybody. Right. Moving swiftly on now to the rest of the meeting, budget revision, and I do have to say this was done before IRP, so there's probably some caveats to this. Ian.
Yeah, just in the interest of time, Chair, I'm going to take these next 2 reports. Paul, the Financial Controller, is here if people have got specific questions. I think the budget revision to reforecast is relatively straightforward. I think there are some questions as to the MPR expenditure through to the end of the year that we'll need to think about following the RP, but obviously there hasn't been time to do that just yet. There are some conversations set for next week with the department to think about the work programme through to the end of the year. Otherwise, I think the recommendations are reasonably clear, but happy to take questions if anybody's got any.
Anyone got any questions for Ian? The recommendations are at item 2, 2.1 to 2.5. No? Are we all happy to approve those? Thank you. Thank you, Ian.
And then I think I'm next as well.
Yes, please. So, business planning update.
This is funding and business planning. The main focus of this was really on the funding. The report sets out the uncertainties that were excellent at the time. This report was written a couple of days, or published for this board a couple of days before the IRP came out. I think it's fair to say that the publication of the IRP moves us on, but we don't currently have detailed proposals, and in the continued absence of our core funding allocation, which is likely to be in January, I understand from the department, the uncertainties that are set out in this report still exist. So there are discussions that have already started with departmental officials to understand the plan for MPR and the consequential effects on TFN
but that is something we will need to bring more detail to this board in January.
Thank
Again,
you.
happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Ian? The recommendation is that the board notes the challenges and approach to the 22-23 business planning process. And I think challenges should be in capital letters. Yeah. Anybody want to ask any questions or comments or anything? We're all happy to approve. Oh yes, Ben.
Thank you. Just to say, to agree with Ian, that we absolutely recognise those challenges. Obviously, we're having the discussions that he mentioned, and we'll work as quickly as we can to get certainty to some of those resolutions to some of those issues.
Thank you, Ben. So everyone approve the paper? Yes? Okay, thank you. The next one is the Decarbonisation Strategy. Really important document. Peter Cole, welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. I'm hoping that you have some slides in front of you, but if not, I shall plough on. Don't really need them. So we brought the consultation version of TFN's Decarbonisation Strategy to you in March, and since then we've been busy updating that strategy following a public consultation during the summer. And today we're reporting on the outcomes from the consultation and bringing that updated strategy back to you for approval. We had 240 responses, which was pretty good, bearing in mind it was quite a technical document and therefore quite a technical consultation. And for TFN, our main objectives were firstly to understand the level of support and any concerns around our general approach to the strategy, but perhaps more importantly, to understand how we best move on from this point. How do we turn this strategy into action? We wanted to understand people's views on our suggested short-term activities and particularly the role that TFN could best play in delivering them. About 2/3 of respondents agreed or strongly agreed with TFN's approach. About 20% didn't. And in terms of support, many respondents acknowledged the need for urgent decarbonisation action and therefore welcomed TFN taking this on and producing what is the first regional decarbonisation transport strategy. Many also highlighted the potential for decarbonisation in levelling up. And some respondents had concerns surrounding where the money for decarbonisation was going to come from, the potential for those wider environmental and social impacts of decarbonisation measures, and the role of TFN as well, including our ability to drive the level of change that we've identified within the document, as well as implementing the activities described in the strategy. And in terms of those potential activities, we proposed 30. Knowing we wouldn't be able to address all of them before 2025, we asked respondents which would be their top 3 to prioritise for urgent action. And 4 activities really stood out as priorities from respondents, and they gained about twice the level of support than any of the other 30 proposed activities. And they were identifying appropriate routes for rail electrification alongside DFT and Network Rail, developing and improving our regional public transport infrastructure, including MPR, developing a regional zero-emission vehicle charging infrastructure framework, and developing a regional route map for transport decarbonisation. And those themes were also really strongly reflected by respondents when they were asked to identify local and national decarbonisation policy priorities, with the responses showing the most support for policies focused on modal shift by investing in public transport networks and rebuilding public confidence in the safety and value of public transport. The consultation also featured a number of open questions, and so these are questions which allowed respondents to answer in their own words. And the key themes that emerged, again, achieving modal shift, that stood out as the aim that most respondents considered to be of most importance. Concerns around the adequacy of electric vehicle charging infrastructure in the north, the need for more focus on freight and freight efficiency, and also that shift of road freight to rail, support for the clean growth opportunities set out by TFN and general support for aviation and shipping being included in TFN's emissions baselines in the future, and then concerns around the wider risks associated with decarbonisation, such as the potential to marginalise certain socioeconomic groups, and in particular, the implications for our rural communities. So we've now updated the strategy to reflect both the outcomes of the consultation and wider engagement, and updates have been as a result of three main areas. Firstly, adding more detail to provide clarification in areas where respondents felt it was needed. Secondly, highlighting the priorities expressed by respondents. And thirdly, adding detail on where we're committing to do further work in the near future to fill any gaps identified. Now, the strategy is important in terms of understanding the challenge, setting out our ambition, and establishing a benchmark. But in the future, we won't be judged on this strategy and the ambitions and recommendations laid out within it, but rather by how well we turn these ambitions into reality on the ground starting from today. So my last point is around turning strategy to action. There needs to be a real and rapid transition from ambitious words to actions on the ground. So we've already commenced a number of high-value decarbonisation activities, including the development of a number of clean mobility visions for the North, focused on evidencing the carbon and wider benefits of reduced car usage and increased public transport and active travel provision. We're developing a regional electric vehicle charging infrastructure framework, which is already approaching the end of its first phase, with outputs due before the end of this year, and we've been facilitating an HGV hydrogen refuelling analysis for strategic road corridors in the north, alongside Durham and Heriot-Watt universities, and that's due to report in January next year. And we've got ambitions to really expand that out, to become multimodal and bring in storage, generation and transport considerations. And then next year, we're looking to advance the activities proposed around aviation and shipping, and also that programmatic appraisal of the carbon within our own investment programme. But we know there are a number of fundamental aspects needed to underpin all of that going forward. Now, I did on my slides have a map which showed some of the early outputs from TFN's work on understanding the geography of transport-related social exclusion in the north. And I've done that as we need to draw on that research and ensure we apply a fairness filter for every single one of those activities and all of our policy recommendations, and move away from just aiming to maintain the status quo towards actually achieving a societal net gain from decarbonisation. We also need to make sure we understand and support the societal readiness of everyone in our communities for the changes that are going to be needed. And we need to focus our future engagement on those groups most affected by transport decarbonisation measures and, of course, the effects of future climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That was an excellent presentation, and I'm really glad to see that there's actions coming at the end, because we can write whatever we like on and have them on our iPads, but unless we actually go and do something, it's worthless. So thank you for that. Has anyone got any questions, observations? Jamie.
Thank you very much. Really like the report. This is a massive issue. Particularly at the point this is about turning strategy into action. That question, where does the money come from, always gets asked. The answer back is, why is it that we always end up trying to find money to fix problems that could have been prevented for a fraction of the cost? The depth of modelling in there, as I always read things, and this really presented me with a challenge. There's a lot of information in there. I can't remember most of it. But the modelling, the capacity that CFN brings is really valuable, and I think that's something we need to protect. In all four scenarios, there's still far too much car usage, and that's not a plan, that is a model. It's the reality that the evidence is looking at. I do very much like the ladder in there that says the first thing is to try and reduce journeys, and then if you can't do that, let's look at active travel, and if you can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And then the last one is best summed up by Henry Ford. He says, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Simply swapping internal combustion engines for massive vehicle batteries Doesn't pass the fairness test because it's really expensive. But when you look at whole life cycle carbon, even electric vehicles, it's 65 grams per kilometre. So the document is fine, is very good and fully supportive of it. But just for the team to take forward, can we really embrace this idea that we don't just want to be swapping internal combustion engines for Henry Ford's version of faster horses?
Thank you. And that was a message that really came strongly from COP as well about it. The key thing is getting people out of any car, no matter how it's driven. So I think that is a challenge. Having said that, I was talking to a director from Vinci, and apparently in Germany they're trialling electric roads so that the cars are recharged as they drive along. So on the autobahns, the inside lane has this automatic, can't even understand how that works. But yes, I think, are you going to have a look now? Oh, is it? Okay.
You know, your phone can charge wireless. It's just that on a big scale.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? Yes?
Yeah. Hi, Steve Curl from Cumbria LEP. This is really important for Cumbria. And we support the Northern Powerhouse Rail project as much as anybody, even though we only appear on the maps twice. We don't appear in the text. But from a carbon point of view, I mean, I really welcome this report. It's excellent in its detail. I think it provides a model for other regions. But from our perspective in Cumbria, for every one person that lives in Cumbria, 80 to 100 people visit us. 50% of our carbon emissions are from visitors. So my point is very simple, which is we'd really welcome the inclusion of the rural areas, the less populated areas in this, but we're going to need the full support of TFN and anybody else to enable us to decarbonise Cumbria with our ambitions for 2037. So we look forward to reciprocity there, and I think Keith wants to add something to that.
I think he was waving.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, he's a very nice guy.
Can you come through the chair, please, Keith? Thank you. Yeah. Did you want to come in?
Thanks very much for the report. So, Tim Traveller from Liverpool. We'd just like to pledge our commitment to support, to work with you in the development and implementation. Clearly, we have a 30-year strategy for sustainability, which includes decarbonisation as a core part of that, along with the other things that we have to do to make sure that we protect the environment. There's a lot of work underway already, and we have a regional plan for the North East and the North West regions that are being developed to deliver that strategy. So just a pledge of our commitment and support to work with you. Thank you.
That's great. Okay, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a very quick one, and thanks, Jamie. And I'm sorry, but I'm taking delivery of a new electric vehicle tomorrow, and I should have literally gone for a different horse, you know, to have done that. But, you know, I think we've got to enlighten what's actually in the report, Chair, and I do believe it's a very good report, an in-depth report, and I think we should have it noted that we thank the authors of that report for the amount of work that's gone into it. But I'm pleased to say within the report, and it's mentioned about the freight. As I've mentioned earlier, freight is very important to the Humber and to the rest of it. And also, you know, we are where we are, Jamie, we've got to, you know, invest in those EV charging. We've got to make sure that there are adequate EV charging for the whole of the economy. You know, we're looking towards phasing out, you know, cars, but at the present time we've got to do that. And talking about the freight, I'm just hopefully that we need to be looking at the correct infrastructure that's put in place, ready for what our ambitions are for the freight in our areas. So it's important that infrastructure is put in place to counterbalance what we are doing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And that goes back to Northern Powerhouse Rail. In delivering that, we'll free up space for freight. Already we're seeing in our area competing freight and passenger lines. So the sooner we get MPR delivered, the better, really. Charlie.
Apologies, I had to leave the room shortly there, Chair. I just want to say that this report is extremely welcomed. Obviously, we've got a team, we've now got an emerging climate change team at Lancashire County Council, and we're all over this, as everybody else is. We're fully, really thank you for the work that's been done on this. This report and then the subsequent reports, I think, need to demonstrate what TFN is all about. And if I can speak directly to our friends at the DFT right now, this kind of work is what Transport for the North is all about. We are ambitious, we're collegiate, and we want to align our priorities with the priorities of the nation to do the things that matter, which is decarbonise the economy, get us levelled up, get us jobs, get us growth and all the rest of it. When you are talking and devising how much money you think that TFN needs, please take this report as this should be your inspiration. This is what the power of TFN really can be. So I just want to really make that point and stress to you how important TFN can be. So please take this and go away and give us some more money.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of the recommendations, we've got those short-term actions that you're proposing, Peter, that we do. It'd be quite good, I think, to get, because we need to get on with this. We can't dither around. So I just wondered if we need to bring some regular reports back with our progress towards our decarbonisation ambitions. And also, because it is such a massive document, is there any chance we would have like a short sort of version that we could show to the public, you know, graphical and just something that's nice and easy to read? And is that okay?
Yeah, the intention is to do an at a glance. We wanted to get everyone's comments and approval first, and then we'll produce that shortly. Thank you.
Fabulous. So is everyone happy with this? Yes? Okay. Clearly carried. Thank you. Next one, Major Roads Report. Owen. Thank you. This item 8.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll try and be brief as well because I'm conscious of time. This report is set out as a position statement in terms of supporting TFN in our statutory role to advise on investment, in this case, investment in major roads. So what it does try to set out is the fundamental role that major roads do play in our society now, and they will do in the future. And in terms of major roads, I'm talking around 7% of the network, 2% is managed by national highways, 5% by local highway authorities, and that's where our focus has been rather than on the local network, though of course major network needs to be integrated with local transport, road, active travel, rail and bus. It's an inconvenient truth that most travel is on the road and will continue to be on the road, with 88% of all passenger miles travelled by road and 2/3 of freight distance on the road network. But there are, of course, major challenges ahead, and we've worked very closely with Peter Cole in developing this report. And I guess one of the fundamental things is the growth in traffic we've seen in the last 40 years in this nation, with almost a doubling in traffic, and the impacts that has, both in terms of carbon emissions, but also on congestion and on communities. There's the urgent need to decarbonise, which we've heard about, with 95% of carbon emissions from surface transport coming from road transport. So we can't ignore it. We need to do something about that road transport. And what hasn't been touched on, the cost of congestion to the economy, hasn't been touched on today. That continues to be significant, around 60 billion, according to the department's figures at the kind of national level, or 13 pence per kilometre driven. And that congestion, as well as being a cost to businesses and people, has impacts on local communities through air quality, noise emissions, etc. So they're all major issues we need to tackle. And I also want to highlight kind of what we're up against in terms of the reduced cost of motoring that we've seen over the last 10 years. And there's actually quite an interesting graph produced by the RAC Foundation that shows you the trajectory of relative costs compared to wage increase, with motoring actually coming down in cost, around about 10% reduction, whereas bus 60% more, rail about 20 to 30% more. So no wonder people are choosing the car if they've got those kind of drivers pushing them into car-based transport. So what the report is trying to say, and hopefully you will see in the summary document, there's also a much longer, more technical report, which we deliberately avoided sharing with you directly today, because it's 160 odd pages long, but has been shared with the scrutiny committee, is that we need evidence-led solutions, place-based solutions based on the need in local communities, and it has to be a whole systems approach, focusing on improving other modes first, reducing dependence on the car,
and adding capacity where, you know, you've looked at all those other options and you may still require additional capacity, whether that's to open up new developments, new housing growth, etc., or where there are parts of the north that are really poorly connected and rail, may not be an option. What we've also stated is there needs to be a national conversation on how we raise revenue from transport, and particularly road transport. As everyone in this room knows, with the move to electric vehicles, there'll be a decline in fuel duty payments and vehicle excise duty payments, a significant hit to the Treasury over the next 10 years. So there has to be a national debate on how we raise revenue from transport in the future. And that should also think about how that money is invested in the future in transport, not just in road, potentially, could be in other modes, or supporting bus transport on the road network, where that makes sense, where the evidence shows that that is the best option. So to conclude, the report is a position statement. It will support us in discussions with National Highways, with our relationship with the highway authorities across the north, and gives us that remit, if you like, to work with those bodies and say, this is how we say we should pursue investment in roads, looking at other options before road capacity improvement, but in some instances we may need to see additional road capacity. I just wanted to add that we had quite a detailed discussion at scrutiny, including questions from Mr. Anthony Ray, I think is known to many people on this board, and Appendix 1 of the report responds to those questions, which were actually really helpful. And in terms of how we will assess road investment, we are using the future scenarios that have been built into the decarbonisation strategy, and to assess potential investment, whether it would be needed in the future if we move to a kind of more urban net zero future with less reliance on the car. So I'll stop there.
Thank you for that very clear overview of the paper. Darren, is your hand up?
It is. It's a fascinating paper, not least of all on page 14. I saw of your document, of your summary report, was the just how many journeys are 0 to 2 kilometres, which is about a mile, isn't it? So, 8% of all journeys are a mile or less. So, I mean, I think it's back to sort of thing Jamie was saying earlier. I think it's the 50 kilometres plus and those first two boxes where if we're really serious about impacting on the climate, where we've got to make the most move, where people potentially, it's not even necessarily a public transport alternative. It's about a sort of perhaps an active travel stroke healthier living alternative, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And we've talked about active travel, and I'd just like to see how we can link this into it, because your active travel is for those short, less than a mile or 2 miles, depending how active you are, and it's how we can sort of integrate that into all of this. So I think that's perhaps the next stage that we need to look at, and it's that whole network, isn't it, linking so someone steps out the door, walks to a bus station, gets a bus to the train station, train to Bradford, and then they can come home easily. Whereas, particularly rural areas, it's a real challenge to get anywhere. So, any comments? Great to see scrutiny, really scrutinising this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick couple of points, really. And again, we've talked in depth this morning about freight and how important it is to try and get more freight onto the rail network. But it's also important that we don't forget, what we've got on the highways as well. And we've got to not, put that to the back burner. And it is just as important to us to get the infrastructure right. And like a lot of the local authorities just recently, North East Lincolnshire was one of the ones that missed out on the Levelling Up Fund that would have enabled us to have improved, the highway. We've got some major concerns on the A180 leading into North East Lincolnshire that needs addressing. And that's where we was disappointed to miss out on the £14 million of a £50 million bid that would enable us to do those repairs that are needed before they get too bad. So I'm hoping that maybe in the future we can look with Transport for the North to try and get something on the programme to help us with those actually major repairs that need doing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Jamie?
Thank you. And as a professional engineer, I'm nothing if not pragmatic when it comes to these matters. The ladder of decision making that's on page 225 is excellent, and for me that's the core of what needs to happen. We do need to acknowledge that inevitably the road network is the thing that stops right outside your house, and for many people, particularly people of limited mobility, that is key. One of the best ways we can deal with congestion, though, is to look at road schemes from the point of view of making them better for buses. And literally 5 minutes outside my front door is a newly built bus gateway, where there's a lane that the bus goes down, the transponder on the bus changes the traffic signals so the cars stop in the approach to the roundabout, the bus can go straight around with 70 people on it, and then when it's gone, it goes back. These are the sort of things, when we come to talk about improving our road network, that we really need to zero in on.
That's a great example, that. I like that one. Don?
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report. I think as North Yorkshire County Council has 6,000 miles of highways and very few railways, so I often feel that, and I've told Peter Molyneux this, that we tend to neglect within this board the importance of highways to the travelling public in large rural areas like North Yorkshire. But we are doing our best, and you're quite right, Chair, to point out that if we can break people's habits, change people's behaviour, and persuade them to walk or cycle rather than drive relatively short distances, and the average distance travelled, for example, in the Harrogate area is only 2.7 kilometres. If we can do that, we do a lot to help our carbon footprint. And I think it's worth mentioning also that 3 of our towns, Skipton, Harrogate and Selby, did benefit from the Leeds City Region Transforming Cities Fund, and we're very grateful to the Leeds City Region for that, because we've attracted £42 million worth of investment to convert our gateways into much more sustainable travel and public transport related facilities.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Can I just make a point about pricing policy and how important it is? And we can say all that we want about a lot of these things, but I mean, I had occasion this weekend to go and watch Blackburn Rovers playing in Bristol, and I mean, apart from everyone's sympathy, the price on the railway was £180. Now, I wouldn't do that, would I? So I didn't do that, and so, because my partner came with me, she suffers as I do, and so we got the train, sorry, we got the bus, we got the car, sorry, the point I'm getting to is not only did we drive there, but we also queued for about 2 hours on the M6 in some great big schmozzle round about Birmingham. It took us about 7 hours to do the journey. We put all those emissions, but I'd do it again because I wouldn't pay 180 quid. And at the back of that, these are decisions that individual people make, you know. No, we got a draw, Andy, which was as good as a win, really, in our lives.
The Man United, though, wasn't
it? Yeah, but I mean, it's a serious point. If we want people, not people like me with plenty of money as well, but people with not a lot of money to make judgments that do that, then they will not do it if the pricing policy is as it is.
Yeah, quite agree. Hear, hear. Martin?
Just to remind board members that the partnership board this afternoon, we've actually got Nick Harris from the Chief Executive of National Highways doing a presentation, because we do recognise, picking up on the point earlier about the key role that the highway network plays as part of our transport system. There are choices that we need to make in how we use the space, and some of those choices maybe need to be different. And if I may just kind of build on a point that Councillor Edwards made earlier, this is one of the unique things that you've got within the TFN team, the modelling and the capability to actually look at these alternatives. I've not come across anything like it in the profession anywhere else in the country, and it is a real asset, and it gives you to have the conversations that Owen's been talking about there in terms of the longer term objectives. And as we look at the independent economic review update, as we look at updating the strategic transport plan, that's the kind of technical, strategic, evidence-led discussion that we will be wanting to have with you over the next 12 to 18 months.
Thank you. So we're happy to approve the recommendations in the report? Yes? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Next, item 9, rail reforms. David Hogarth. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Chair, and I will be brief. Back to rail again, I'm afraid, but it's very important because given the IRP discussions, we're going to need the industry to deliver trains, to deliver timetables, to deliver value for money fares, and this is the radical reform of the rail industry that we've been talking about, and the board considered a paper on some principles for the North at the last meeting. We've taken those, we've worked with Network Rail in the first instance to develop those, and I think the key conclusion here is we've got some really strong building blocks in the North where we can be a pathfinder for that rail reform. So we've got the Rail North Partnership where we are co-signatories and co-clients on the rail services at the moment, and we propose to build on that. We can use that to help the city regions build strong local integrated networks and really put forward the North as a pathfinder for this work. So the principles we set out, I won't go through them all in detail, they're in the paper, but it's about using our evidence base, actually, our strategic transport plan, to work collaboratively with the rail industry on the 30-year plan that they have to develop, so making sure our evidence base is front and centre of that plan, leading to a prioritised pipeline of investment. Very important, we have a long-term pipeline of investment, but we also have regard to the funding available in a particular period, so we can actually prioritise that investment in the best way that delivers the best outcomes for the North. We then jointly set the outputs we want from the rail industry, so again, using the Rail North Partnership mechanism. So, for example, the commitment for pay-as-you-go ticketing that was made alongside the integrated rail plan. We think the North can be a pioneer on that. We can actually use some of the powers we've already got in the Rail North Partnership to simplify the fare structure around that and make the whole system easier to use in the North. So we've got an offer there from the North. Very importantly, we've made a key feature double devolution here. So working with the city regions, it's not one size fits all, but looking at the right model in each local area to deliver those truly integrated local networks, whether that's a much more hands-on approach in some areas on the specification, or in other areas where perhaps it's more a strategic approach. We're drawing on some of the really good work in Liverpool city region, where they've got the devolved network, North East, where they have not only the Tyne and Wear Metro, both those networks, by the way, have driven investment in new rolling stock recently, and innovation in that as well. So we can draw on a lot of that experience and really work with the mayoral authorities, but other authorities who want similar as well, to make that mesh together for the North and use, again, some of the powers we've already got in the Rail North Partnership around business units as a first step to that further devolution. And very importantly, we talked to the industry about a profit and loss account for the North, which would, yes, have the financial elements, but could also bring in the wider decarbonisation, social benefits that we want to see as part of our strategy. And that would be used to help inform that prioritisation and decision making. And actually, really importantly, it's a step towards where you want to go in terms of the Northern Transport Charter. We've had some very positive discussions with Network Rail industry about that. So the next step would be to engage more formally on this, if you're happy for us to do that, with the Great British Railways transition team directly on the proposals that are in the paper, hopefully put us ahead of the game and get some passenger and freight outputs more quickly than other parts of the country. As was being touched on earlier, we've also made reference to the Great British Railways headquarters and obviously asking the board to support lend support for that being in the north of England. So I'll leave it there. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, David. Any comments? Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, David, for the paper. As this is something which is to do with realising economic potential and economic productivity gains, as you say in your paper, I wonder if under the recommendations you could add mandating officers to engage also with the LEPs, not only because I think it might bring something out of the process, but also because I think we must play to our unique strengths of transport for the North in these matters. A unique strength is that we have political and business leadership in a room together agreeing on things. And particularly at a time when we have the debate about what a co-sponsor means and the NTAC approach from central government, I think it would be really helpful in dealing with this matter to involve business. Thank you.
Yes, I'm happy to include that under recommendation 3, where it says mandate officers. We'll add in LEPs. Okay, is everyone happy with that? Yeah. Charlie?
Thank you, Chair. I think the most innovative thing that we've talked about today has been the idea about harnessing the local contribution as a way of jointly funding extra services and infrastructure on the rail. And I'd like to just, I think obviously Shaps Williams' review wants to be ambitious, and that's great. And I would like to see us as almost like the test case for that model of the private, public, I don't know what you call it, but that local contribution model. I think that is potentially the most ambitious thing we can do. And so as a soft steer, I'd say that maybe that's something that we could incubate. We could be the test pilot of that in the north. That's innovation, and I think it's probably the most important innovation that we can offer.
Thank you. I can't speak for GBRTT because they are a separate entity from Network Rail. However, great to see your paper and the engagement, so I'm sure that's positive. One point though, let's not wait, because GBRTT is going to take some time to get set up. There's a legislative process to complete. One of the points you drew out was about a joint P&L, for example. Well, we've already got some really good examples of that work underway, certainly between my colleagues and Northern Trains, so that we have created that first time for 30 years a whole railway P&L, which is hugely powerful information within that. So, I think there's every opportunity to sort of move forward on things like that whilst the legislative process and GBR isn't ready. Actually, today's railway can also, entertain discussions like that.
That's a really good point. We just need to get on with these things, don't we, and have real ambition about what we're doing. Keith?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just need a word of caution. Everything now seems to be around us making contributions to government. Can I just say that every project that we try to put forward in Cumbria ends up with us not being able to do it because we can't afford the contribution we're asked for by government. So I don't know whether Charlie's got an awful lot of money in Lancashire, but if he has, he can put some of it on a train down to Cumbria.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? Craig and then Andy?
Thanks very much, Chair. I welcome the report also. I just want to focus in, of course, on the Great British Railways HQ. The report proposes that TfN supports the location of the new headquarters in the north. I think given the lengthy debate we've had under item 4 on this agenda, that is absolutely essential. Obviously, I have an interest in it being in Crewe, but if it doesn't come to Crewe, I very much want it to come to another part of the north and nowhere else. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Andy?
It was just to pick up this point about local contributions so that we don't get ourselves in a difficult position on it. It is well used in other parts of the world, whereby when you commit to a new transport service, land values on the line kind of rise, and we, as a country, we have not been good at capturing that. Other countries capture that uplift. So I think contribution, i.e. somehow finding money. Keith, I agree with you. I think this is we're pursuing very traditional ways of raising the funds to very central government. Says what it can afford, and then you just get what you're given. I mean, that's basically what we've discussed today, Chair. I think what we're saying is that if there is lots of international evidence that shows how you can, both at the time you announce the route, you put a mechanism in place to capture the value on that route, and that's the local contribution. Because obviously otherwise that money stays local, but it stays in the hands of businesses and whoever, and it's not money that then, it's a windfall basically for people locally. And what this is about is capturing that to help pay for the thing that's creating the benefit. So I think we just need to be clear. If we're going to hang our hat on it a bit more, I think we need to be clear what it is and what it isn't.
Yeah, Tracey.
Just to add that it may be of interest, just to follow up on Andy's point, that only a moment ago the Transport Minister said in the Commons a new line between Manchester and Leeds via Bradford did simply not make economic sense. Well, we can potentially help government understand the economic solutions to that. So we do have a job of work there.
Yeah, I quite agree, and I wonder if we task officers with the expertise that they have to go away and do that piece of work.
If I might, Chair, I'm very happy to do that. It's an area where I've had some experience in previous roles, and indeed I know the Northumberland line, it may be what Mayor Driscoll's going to say, there's some experience with a certain expertise that I'm aware of that they're using in Northumberland. I think we can look at that in quite positive terms. Good. Did you want to come in, Jamie?
Just very briefly, on the Northumberland line, we don't have the statutory powers, but we have been doing it. We haven't got anything like the amount of money we'll get if we did have the statutory powers to do it. This was backed by the Mayor of London in 2013, who is now the Prime Minister, in the London's Finance Commission report, backed again in 2017 by the then Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, and is also covered in a paper I published a couple of months ago.
Thank you. Okay, so are we happy with the recommendations?
With the addition of the
Yeah, with the addition of the lapse, and also how we capture that, tasking officers to do that piece of work about. Yes, okay. Everyone happy? Yes, okay, good. Next one is item 10, appointment of Transport for the North Board and Partnership Board Chair. I'll do this very quickly. We interviewed last week excellent candidates. Because we weren't aware at the time of what was coming out in the IRP, we're going to have a second round of interviews coming up very shortly based on the outcomes of the IRP. So there is no appointing a chair today. We're proposing it comes to January board, if you're happy with that. Andy?
I'm not sure I am, Chair, in that obviously for all the reasons we've discussed today, we're at a critical moment here. And we have to have a chair who's really going to steer us, as you've been doing and have done today. We need somebody who is absolutely going to be on the side of the North in this debate about where the IRP ends up and what. And I would be a little uncomfortable with a sort of preferred candidate coming to this board without us having had a sense of how they are going to approach that critical issue, building on what this board has resolved today. And so I don't know what comfort you can offer, but I do think this board needs a sense of views on the, on that critical question of how would you take this conversation forward with the government and how would you secure some of the North's ambitions, if not all. I do think we cannot, to have a candidate that just appears for our endorsement feels like a slightly difficult place to end up at the moment.
Thank you. So first of all, you have delegated that responsibility. There were really robust interviews, and the whole purpose of the second interview is for them to tell us exactly what you've said, Andy. So if those two candidates don't come up with the answer that we want, then we might have to go back to stage one. So please be reassured that that the interview panel were really clear about that, which is why we didn't make the decision at the time. But we have got some excellent candidates. So, Steve.
I just wonder whether it's in confidence at this moment in time through HR practices. Otherwise, can we be told in confidence who they are? And I'm getting the shake of the head, so I can see the answer.
It is confidential at the moment, and we can't disclose, I'm afraid.
Okay. The second part of it is that the former chair also had a role in NTAC, and whether that's part of the role of the new chair.
Not as far as I know. No.
Chair, just to confirm, it's not part of the brief for or the job description for the chair of the board and the partnership board. It's not in the brief.
Ben?
Yeah, just to confirm, that's our understanding as well, and indeed, John Quidland retains a role as president of NTAC.
So there'll be all hours just to focus on us in the north. So yeah. So please. So Keith, have you got a question? All right. Okay. So, are you happy with that approach? And we'll bring something back in January. Okay. Item 11 is the governance report. Julie, can you just take us very, very quickly, bearing in mind hopefully people have read this?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. As quickly as possible. So, briefly, the report covers the following main areas: appointment of members, future board meetings arrangements, some minor constitution changes, and consideration of the Rail North Committee membership. The first matters to make the outstanding appointments for General Purposes Committee from the September meeting. Nominations have been made to most of the regions now, as set out in Appendix 1, and members are invited to approve those. Further outstanding nominations may, of course, be submitted today, and I have been informed meantime by Cheshire East that it's been agreed that the region nominee for there is Councillor Laura Crane of Cheshire East, and I think Councillor Brown has confirmed that to me this morning. We can then begin to work with members to set up an inaugural meeting and an agenda. There also remains one vacancy on the Audit and Governance Committee, as only one of the two vacancies for board members was appointed to in September. Audit and Governance Committee can function with a vacancy, but obviously for quorum purposes, it's going to be more resilient if all of those seats are filled, so members may wish to make one or more nominations to choose from for that particular vacancy to be filled. Regarding arrangements for board meetings, as the report set out, over recent months, obviously, you've received a number of reports. Board has expressed a wish to be able to hold hybrid meetings and has updated the Constitution to provide for that, whilst also recognising that that was subject to being able to bring in and embed the necessary IT and technological arrangements, which are obviously complex because TFN has no premises of its own from which to hold meetings. In order to help enable arrangements to be made more easily for that, it's therefore recommended that in future there would be each year one board meeting in Manchester, one in Leeds, two further meetings as Chief Executive consultation calls, and others to be convened as required. So that recommendation is put before board for consideration. There are two other minor constitutional changes covered in the report. Firstly, relating to the element of the terms of reference of the Partnership Board, which was suspended at the last meeting to allow our interim chairing arrangements. And the second, fully reflecting the full current version of the Code of Conduct, which applies to non-elected board members and which is referred to at paragraph 38.3 in Appendix 12 of our Constitution. On the first matter, obviously, because it was expected today that the other report might recommend appointment of an independent chair. Given that won't happen to a future meeting, I recommended that the removal of that suspension be deferred until that future meeting. The Appendix 12 replacement to the Cabinet Office Code of Conduct for non-elected members is simply an administrative update to ensure the Constitution matches the applicable version. That might arguably have been dealt with under delegated powers in consultation with the Chief Executive, but given the current recruitment process for a new chair and the importance of that, for full transparency, it's brought before you just to confirm that necessary update to match up with 38.3 of the Constitution. The changes are fairly minimal. They're more in the nature of clarification rather than any fundamental change, but there are a few clarifications, such as in the conflict of interest section and the addition of a social media section and details about raising any concerns. And finally, but importantly, on the issue of Rail North Committee membership, the report appends the letter which was received from the four leaders in the Humber region, including Councillor Hale, and the rationale supporting why board might wish to allow the Humber region two representatives on Rail North Committee for the time being, and until a more general view might be appropriate. That is to have one representative north of the Humber and one south of the Humber. Obviously, that's entirely a matter for board to consider. The alternative approach, which would be to remain with the current arrangement, albeit noting that any board member can attend Rail North Committee and contribute to debate with the Chair's agreement, is also open to board, of course. Obviously, that may not address the concerns of the Humber leaders. I'm sure members will obviously want to elaborate on that, but it's a matter for board to consider and determine and select the option that it would like to pursue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Julie. So just on that Humber issue, do you want to comment, Darren?
Yeah, obviously it was the preferred position of the option 2 is preferred option of the Humber leaders. I mean, just very briefly to say that, I mean, this model was an assumption was made going back that there'd be some sort of devolution model across the Humber, but our colleagues south of the river have decided that they'd rather their future lies with Lincolnshire rather than Yorkshire. So in some respects, I think it's a sensible suggestion, option 2, and that was what all the four authority leaders agree, if that's all right with the board.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan. Is everybody happy with Darren's suggestion for that option 2? Okay, I do need to just check on the Cheshire East situation. Craig, can you just explain that? Because, and is it doable for someone who's not part of the board to come into this. So if you could just talk through, because I'm not sure I've quite agreed to that yet. Sorry.
If I could, thank you, Chair. If I could provide some clarity, yes, I'm happy to support Councillor Crane's nomination to the General Purposes Committee. As a result of that, she would replace Councillor Corcoran as my substitute to this board.
So does that need to go through as well, if that's...
Yes, Chair, I have been informed that that change has been made by Cheshire East, so it would be helpful if board could also approve that.
Okay, so can we make sure that's approved then? Steve?
Chair, on a slightly controversial note, there's two venues that have been chosen, Manchester and Leeds, and then two that are open to debate and discussion. And actually, it's difficult to get from where I am even to here. It's a couple of hours, as you know, and the same for you and others coming across, and probably from Hull the other way. But actually, what it does is demonstrate just how fragmented the transport system is. And what I'd suggest is that the other extremities, so Hull and Liverpool, are the other two options, and people will soon know why it is that we feel so strongly about the issues we've raised today.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good idea, and I know Councillor Little, it's taken him since last night, I think, to get here. I was going to suggest Chester, actually. There was a meeting there once, but yes, I think we need... I quite agree. It does. I think the more we can spread it round, the better, but it does mean that on those occasions, someone's got to leave at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and we need to make sure we finish on time and those sort of things. But so certainly we'll take that away. Obviously, Liverpool's handy for me, so I'd be happy for that. Are we okay then? We
On
take
the basis that Keith doesn't propose Whitehaven, I suppose I'll agree.
Well, we could go somewhere like Ambleside.
That's definitely overnight, isn't
it?
it?
Definitely. Okay. So I think that's approved, Julie.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so that's the end of the board meeting. I'm going to propose that the partnership board starts at 2:15 because there is a press conference now, which will give us half an hour to do press stuff and maybe get a butty or something. So thank you all for your contributions today. Once again, a fantastic meeting. Thank you.
Well, Chair.